Big Dumb Movie is a comedic podcast that often contains obscene language and outlandish commentary. Listener discretion is advised.
Hello and welcome to Big Dumb Movie, where we discuss movies of the big dumb variety. I'm your host, Corey, and I'm joined today with two friends of mine. First up is Steve.
Where am I? Where? I just woke up. Where is this? What did you drag me here? I'm not even dressed. What's going on right now? Is this a podcast? Oh, shit. All right. Well, hello.
Hello, Steve. Also joining us once again, the fabulous review dude, Josh.
Steve, is that you? Is that your voice? Somebody get this bag off of me.
Oh, God. Did he tape you up, too?
I'm here, too, Steve.
Oh, God. This is the scratchiest rope I've ever been tied up with, Corey.
Thank you guys for being here. I'm so glad that we're getting together to do a podcast on the 1994 Goth classic, The Crow. What a film.
Love it.
So much to talk about with this movie.
Yeah.
This movie has a very particular, dingy, grimy, 90s goth indie rock vibe that is really owned by this movie, but also is kind of, shared with some other similar movies from this era. Some this era, some maybe a previous era, but there's like a vibe. The Crow is a vibe. There's other movies like this that I want to talk about real quick before we talk about The Crow. And I think The Craft has this kind of vibe. If I'm going to talk about movies of this era, if someone's like, oh, you like The Crow, what else would you like? Maybe The Craft, maybe Dark City. There's some other movies like this that I think have a similar kind of aesthetic. Not necessarily story, but definitely aesthetically.
Dark City's the big one, obviously.
Well, that's same director.
Yeah,
right?
and he's just got that aesthetic so nailed down. I think to some degree, The Lost Boys is another gothy movie. It's very driven by music.
Yeah, the Lost Boys feels damp in the way that this movie feels damp.
Right?
Yeah.
I think to some degree, obviously very different in every other regard, but Blade Runner, the way they load you into that version of LA, very much like this version of Detroit, it's just that dampness, that constant wetness, darkness, dirtiness. Everything's dingy, everything's covered in a layer of grime, and you can't really get away from it. There's bad stuff going on everywhere. I think there's a few other movies that are not necessarily at all similar tonally, but are very similar in the surreal aspect. I was thinking about this
vibe. Vibe is the word, man.
Yeah, but I think there are there are multiple components to that vibe, right? And the surrealism for me is one distinct, I was thinking Dark Crystal and Labyrinth. They're not driven by Labyrinth a little bit because Bowie, but they're not driven by music in the same way, and they're not gothy, but they're both built to have that very surrealistic tone. Or even Edward Scissorhands, where it's supposed to be the real world, but it's a version of the real world that never looks or feels quite real, or toys with Robin Williams, which you did a review on. Two of the others that popped into my mind, though, in terms of that grimness that I thought were kind of weird, dark fantasy tales from around the same era, were the horror movie adaptations of Rapunzel and Snow White that were from the mid-late 90s.
The Sigourney Weaver Snow White.
Yeah.
They made horror adaptations of everything back then.
Yes, you're right. Yeah, Josh, Sigourney Weaver wasn't one of them. And yeah, you're right. Almost everything was ripe for a horror adaptation at that point.
There's the evil Pinocchio one. And then there's, I think the same year was the Jonathan Taylor Thomas Pinocchio one.
Which was more frightening.
Josh, what about you, man? I just want to get the discussion going about some movies that are kind of like this, like The Crow, right? That got the Crow vibe. What do you think?
So, I'm glad Steve mentioned Edward Scissorhands, because the way I would always kind of compare this movie and movies like this, it's like RoboCop with a Tim Burton film. In terms of absurdity, the villains are just over the top. They have no redeeming qualities. It's just pure revenge, and it's fucking awesome with a Tim Burton vibe. So Sleepy Hollow and shit like that. And The Craft is a good one, I think, Corey. Dark City, obviously. Just that 90s goth kind of distinct era. I think 90s goth is a distinct era, 80s goth, and modern goth is just basically a hot topic. So
The opening club scene in the first Blade.
Oh yeah,
The Meat Factory Club. I fucking love it.
yeah.
I'm glad you talked about Tim Burton, Josh, because
Yeah.
to me, this kind of has a similar feel to 89 Batman.
This would have
yeah.
been fascinating if he had, not that I dislike what Proyas did at all, but it would have been fascinating if he'd done this. And he, I believe, was pretty close friends in real life, or at least acquainted in real life with Susie Sue from Susie and the Banshees, and he used one of their songs in Batman Returns in the scene where Selena and Bruce are dancing at Shrek's party. And she was her and her music were a huge influence for the comic. It would have been really interesting to see.
Yeah, Face to Face. It's a great
Oh
song.
God, I love that song.
You should
so
say Max
much.
Shrek though, because if you say Shrek,
Oh, that's true.
what do you
People
think our
the ogre?
what do you think our listeners are going to envision?
You know what though? If there's an editor out there, Josh, yourself included, who can mash Shrek the ogre into Max Shrek's part from Batman Returns, I would love to see how that turns out.
Oh, I think I could whip something up.
Amazing.
This power plant's my legacy. Wait, how would he say that? Can one of you guys do a Shrek impression?
I'm not very good with walking. Santa Claus.
No,
Frank
like Austin Powers, Michael Myers Shrek.
Oh, there's no way. I'll never get that voice. No.
Donkey!
That was good, but do a Max Shrek line as that voice, Josh.
Oh. Mr. Cobblepot, sir. I
Just
don't
a
know.
push mo.
I think I sound more like Scotty from Star Trek.
All right, that's all right. We're not known for our impressions on Big Dumb Movies, so I'm sorry if this is your first time listening. What we are known for is talking about movies. This movie is The Crow. Like I said, it's a vibe, it's a ride. I'm very excited to talk about this movie front to back. But before we really sink our teeth into the plot of the movie, we like to defer to Steve and say, Steve, how the hell was this movie made?
How the hell was this movie made? So, James O'Barr grew up in the Detroit area. He had kind of a messy childhood that involved foster parents who weren't so nice to him.
Who is he?
He is the author, illustrator, creator of The Crow. The entire thing came from him. He did all the art in the original. This was originally published as a series of comics, or the characters, the story originally started off being a series of comics. He drew them, he wrote them, he did everything. O'Barr, like I said, grew up in Detroit, had a kind of a messy childhood. At some point, late teens, he falls hard for a girl who he meets. The two of them continue to date for several years. In their late teens or early 20s, they get engaged. And he's just working all sorts of odd jobs. He works at a nursing home at some point. I think he's worked like somewhere like a fairground at some point. He definitely ended up being an automobile mechanic at one point in his life and did that for years, even up to the point that he was trying to sell The Crow to people. And the young woman he had been dating and who was engaged to gets killed by a drunk driver. And he goes into an absolute spiral, engages in some very self-destructive behavior. He's working as a mechanic, but he's kind of barely holding his life together. And The Crow comes to him as an idea, as a sort of catharsis, because what he's experiencing this moment where he feels totally helpless. He's lost the girl he thinks is the love of his life. He couldn't do anything to stop it. He couldn't do anything to protect her. He couldn't do anything to save her. And in this downward spiral, he starts having these very dark fantasies about tracking down the guy responsible for killing her for the drunk driving accident and taking revenge. And then that expands into kind of broader fantasies along those same lines. And he starts to formulate what eventually becomes The Crow, which is basically a story in the comic book. It's a bit different than the movie. A young man, Eric, and his girlfriend, Shelley, get stopped on an abandoned country road by a gang of guys who are drug addicts, basically just looking to steal people to fund their addiction. And they end up beating Eric to the point that he's unable to move and leaving him laying on the roadside immobile while they proceed to then rape and murder Shelley. And in the aftermath of the incident, Eric's character gets brought back to the real world by The Crow. We get introduced at this point in the story to the idea that the Crow exists, that it's kind of a courier to help souls get between worlds, and that every once in a while it can bring people back to sort of fix things before they really rest permanently. So Eric is brought back to life by the Crow, and it's pretty... Well, we'll get into this more as we talk about it. Josh referred to this as a straight revenge story, and he's definitely not wrong about that, but it is even more so in the comics. There's really a very hard point on the idea that Eric's whole mission really is just to kill these guys. And it's really not supposed to be about anything other than killing these guys. Another sort of difference we'll touch on as we go on is that Eric in the comic very much knows what he's there to do immediately. There's nothing to learn. In any case, so that launches the story. That's basically where we're at story-wise.
So the comic is different than the movie in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the revenge story is still there. I read the comic recently.
Yeah.
And it seems to be like more about his inner turmoil. Like the comic spends a lot of time on that, and like how this event has affected him, and guilt, overwhelming guilt.
And it's very funny because when you listen to people, even people involved in the film and the commentaries talk about the movie, they consistently try to pitch the changes they made to the film as being about emphasizing Eric's mourning over Shelley and how important it is for him to get back to her. And as much as I love this movie, every time I hear one of them say that, I'm like, did none of you bother reading the comic? Because about a third of it is that. In fact, Eric's got an ongoing dialogue with the bird in the comic, and there's at least one moment, if not more than one moment, where in the comic the bird is like, you are wasting your fucking time doing this. Stop mourning and just go kill the people you're here to kill. You're going to get back to her eventually. And that's a huge core component of the comic. And yeah, a lot got changed. It's really interesting. There's a couple of moments we can touch on when we get there, like with Gideon in the pawn shop, where the movie took it almost verbatim. I mean, the scene with Gideon in the pawn shop is almost exactly like the comic. And then there are other instances where it's very, very, very much different. The Sarah character in this film, who we'll talk about, in the comic is kind of the equivalent of a little girl named Elle, and he doesn't really see her very much in the comic. He finds her waiting outside Funboy's apartment because her mother's upstairs banging around and doing heroin with Funboy. In any case...
I got a question about the comic.
Yes.
So I don't know how publicly known this is, but they did try to make a Crow TV show with Mark Dacascos. Yeah. Eventually, obviously, that show didn't take off. It didn't send Mark Dacascos into stardom, but I don't know. There's a bunch of weird ideas. I don't know if they're from the comic where, like, he learns that the reason he's brought back by this crow has to do with, like, his ancient ancestor who was Native American. And
No, that was all stuff they made up.
Okay, I was like, what the fuck is... I checked out.
The comic book is very much... Let's put it like this. Obar's fiance died. He goes into a super dark place and starts having revenge fantasies. This comic is basically just the physical realization of those revenge fantasies.
So it's just a limited run.
Well, but it wasn't. That's a whole nother interesting thing. I'll touch on that right now. Let's talk about that. So Obar writes this as a revenge fantasy. The whole point of it is to get catharsis about his girlfriend dying, and the whole point is really Eric comes back to kill these guys. Obar is working as an auto mechanic at this point. He's not happy doing it. He takes some of his artwork to a local comic book store owned by a guy named Gary Reed. In 1989, Gary Reed was a comic book store owner. He was also a comic book writer and publisher, a TV and radio host, and he was actually the president of McFarlane Toys from the point of its launch in 93 for 3 years until 96.
Good run.
Reed was just founding a company in 89 called Caliber Press, and he'd bought the rights to some older comics from another publisher that was going defunct. and he was looking for new material, and O'Barr brought the Crow illustrations to him at exactly the right moment. Gary Reed said, I'm launching Caliber Press, a publishing company. I want the Crow to be one of the first things we publish, and O'Barr agreed. So they started running the Crow in 1989. First thing they ran after some advertisements that O'Barr did the art for, the first thing they ran was a prequel that was called Inertia. It was a standalone episode. That was followed by a 4-part story, during which is basically the story we get from this film. In this 4-parter, Eric is hunting down the gang that killed he and Shelley. There was then an additional standalone title called Atmosphere, which is really what Corey was talking about. Atmosphere as a standalone issue is really all Eric reflecting on his relationship with Shelley. It's very shadowy and watercolor. It reminds me a lot of some of Gaiman's Sandman work.
Oh yeah, the art for the original Crow run is so cool.
Like, it really is.
It starts with, it's just like inked at the beginning, and then it's like some light pencils for like the memories, and it. Some other issues have like almost this black and white, like charcoal kind of illustration.
Yes.
Really great aesthetic to this comic.
So they publish a prequel, then a 4-parter, so that's 5 in total. Then there's the 6th one, which was Atmosphere, where he's reflecting on him and Shelley. They get these 6 comics published. They were supposed to continue the story arc into either 1990 or 91. And a September 1990 collection published by Caliber Press contained a preview of what was supposed to be the next issue of The Crow, and it never got published. I do not know why. I don't know what happened. Caliber Press did have financial issues, but not until years later. So The Crow did get published in parts. It really was supposed to keep running for at least about a year longer than it did, but it really just ended up being 6 parts published by Caliber Press in 89. In 1993, a company called Kitchen Sink Press, which itself is sadly no longer in business, took the 6 parts of The Crow that had been published up to that point and reformatted them into a graphic novel with a cover by James O'Barr. And that is how a lot of young people in the early 90s, myself included, got introduced to the story. That graphic novel sold in gigantic quantities. James O'Barr claims that it's something close, it's like 800,000 copies. I think it was a record setter at the time for the most widely sold independent comic of all time. And it is really important to note, this was a very, very, very indie comic book. I mean, you can look at an example like DC's got a label called Vertigo. There's also companies like IDW and Dark Horse that tend to publish a lot of non-mainstream stuff, and that's super awesome, but this is even more underground than that. Caliber was a really small company, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, this is not a mainstream story. In any case, O'Barr got the comic published. Sometime roughly around the time that Caliber was gearing up to do the publishing, a writer named John Shirley went to Caliber Press and pitched them an idea for a comic he called Angry Angel. And I don't really know much about it because there's not a lot of detail. He never actually ended up writing it. But apparently Angry Angel was strikingly similar to the concept for The Crow. And Gary Reed and the people at Caliber responded to John Shirley by saying, this looked good, but we just bought something that's so much like it. We're not going to take it. John Shirley got really curious. He goes and reads the Crow for himself. This dude, I want to mention real quick, this dude has written like 100 books of his own. He's written novels, he's written short stories, he's written TV scripts and screenplays, he's written a bunch of cyberpunk stuff. He's also known for writing episodes for the 1988 RoboCop animated series. He wrote episodes of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Batman Beyond, and also the Spawn animated show that was on HBO.
Oh, nice. Shit.
Nice. So he's had a pretty decent career. He went and read The Crow after Caliber rejected his idea for Angry Angel. He really liked it. He went to James O'Barr and said, I think we can turn this into a movie. And O'Barr said, yeah, let's give it a try and see what happens. They involved a producer named Jeff Most, who also ended up producing the soundtrack for this album, or for this movie. Great soundtrack. So John Shirley, Jeff Most, the producer, and James O'Barr, who wrote The Crow, start working. John Shirley and Jeff Most end up writing 3 script treatments themselves, which they show to O'Barr as they're working. O'Barr then works with them on 2 actual drafts of a screenplay. Shirley then gets writing on his own. John Shirley ended up getting the writing credit for this film because he'd done the most writing specifically for the movie. Then at some point along the way, they involve another producer named Edward Pressman. Pressman, who died actually earlier this year, had a huge list of credits, a bunch of Oliver Stone films, including the 2 Wall Street movies and Talk Radio. He produced an Abel Ferrara movie in 92 called Bad Lieutenant that got remade in 2009 with Nick Cage. He produced one of this podcast's personal favorites, the 1996 version of Island of Dr. Moreau.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Also American Psycho, the 2 Conan movies with Arnold Schwarzenegger, Masters of the Universe, Judge Dredd with Sylvester Stallone. And he also went on to produce all of the other Crow movies after this one. So you've got this big group of people working, which they then bring in another writer named David Shao, or Shao. I'm not really sure how to pronounce his last name. He's been around for a long time. Shao is also a writer, writes a lot of horror, short stories, and novels. He created the name Splatterpunk at a convention in 1986, which is the subgenre of horror that he writes the most within. He's worked on Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies, Nightmare on Elm Street movies, the Creepshow TV show, Masters of Horror. He's written liner notes for DVDs. The guy's done a bunch of stuff. So people who really want to get the details should read for themselves, because I'll be talking for hours if I really go over every step of this. But you've now got John Shirley, a writer, and Jeff Most, a producer, and Edward Pressman, a producer, and John Shao, who's another writer. They're all working on this. Barr is getting some input. They're getting scripts together, and then meetings with studios start. And as they're working, they're trying to figure out what parts of the graphic novel they're going to keep and which parts they're going to change and where they want to adapt and where they don't. And a lot gets changed in the process. Speaking of which, O'Barr goes to a meeting with a studio. I don't know which studio this was, but it was apparently the first studio meeting he had. At first, the studio starts saying, "We think this is a franchise. We would want sequels. Can you do multiple parts?" And he says, O'Barr says, "I would be happy to write other Crow stories that feature other characters, but this is Eric Draven's story and it ends where it ends. I don't want to write sequels that feature him." That's very interesting because Proyas, in one of his commentaries, actually says that he would have been absolutely on board to do additional sequels with Eric and had some ideas about how they might do it, but it never happened. When O'Barr...
Not with the same character anyway, right?
Right. Oh, you're right. Yeah, exactly. The sequels didn't have the same character. O'Barr offers, we could do this maybe as a franchise if you guys want other Crows, and they say no. At some point, somehow, it's another element there's not a lot of detail on, but for some reason, the studio apparently transitioned from, we want this to be an action franchise, to, we want it to be a musical, and how would you feel if we put Michael Jackson in it?
Oh.
Which is the strangest fucking thing I've ever heard. And The Wiz had already been a thing and had mostly been panned by people. So thank God they didn't end up doing that. O'Barr basically said, if these are your ideas, I'm not even interested in making the movie, and he walked.
Fuck all that.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my God.
Right? O'Barr said the one thing he could never get away from was the idea that this needed to be adapted as an action movie. O'Barr ended up being overall very positive in his thoughts about the film. He has said that he liked the way it came out. He has said that he said that he was very friendly with Brandon. He has nothing but good things to say about Brandon, but his worst fear in that respect absolutely came true. Because as much as I love this movie, they did to some degree turn it into an action film, which is something he really did not want. And, after several studio meetings, O'Barr got to the point where he just started feeling like nobody was ever going to understand this idea. But he also started getting to the point where he felt like everyone was so confused over what it needed to be that it was going to end up landing in development hell and never getting made anyway. So there was an offer, I believe, from Paramount that actually included a clause saying we might end up just releasing this only to home video. And O'Barr just took the deal. And he has said very specifically in interviews before that he took the deal believing at that point that the movie was not going to get made and that he should just collect the money and not worry about what was going to happen because they were never going to make the movie anyway. And then at some point from there, things evolved and production started. We can talk more about differences between the film and the comic later, but try to condense some of this. They eventually decided to hire Alex Proyas to direct this movie. He had directed one feature film before this. It was an independent science fiction movie called Spirits of the Air. Other than that, Proyas had only ever done music videos. He'd mostly grown up in Australia. He started directing music videos when he was at a school for performing arts and production in Australia. He moved to Los Angeles after he graduated and did music videos for acts like INXS and Yes and Sting. The people who were putting this film together mostly knew him as a music video director and really liked his style. When Proyas came on, he decided he really wanted the movie to be black and white, the way the comic had been. And this ends up in an interesting sort of argument I'll touch on very quickly. In his commentary on a Blu-ray, Proyas says that he initially planned to shoot the movie in black and white, that he wanted to include very occasional red splashes, sort of the way Spielberg did in Schindler's List. He also thought that he might want to include flashes of blue or green. So he told the production designers not to use any red, blue, or green in the film because even though they were planning on shooting in black and white at this point, those colors will show up in weird ways in the black and white, and he didn't want them to be there. Now, at the same time, in a totally separate commentary recorded years earlier, Jeff Most claims that it was his idea not to include any blues or greens in the production because he thought that removing those from the color palette further disconnected the movie from reality. And it's really impossible to know. I've been accused by some assholes of just regurgitating shit off IMDb. This is why I bring this stuff up. Sometimes the people most intimately involved in the production don't even agree with each other about why a decision was made.
Right, but it's usually a poor decision, right?
Yeah.
In this case, I think this is a good decision.
It's a good decision.
Aesthetically for the movie. But it's usually production people that say, oh, that bad idea? That wasn't me, that was him.
Exactly. And the truth is probably that neither of them are telling the truth or that neither of them really remembers exactly how things went accurately when they're recording a commentary 25 years after the fact.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm going to connect this to another comic book thing very, very, very quickly for anyone who's interested. There is an incredible annotated version of Neil Gaiman's Sandman comics. He did not originally want to do an annotated edition. The reason he chose to do it is because he got asked about a reference during a Comic-Con panel and couldn't remember the reference. And he decided after that he wanted to do the annotated edition of the book because it would give him an opportunity to record all that stuff so that it wouldn't just get forgotten, which I think is very interesting.
Yeah, it just sits in your memory,
Right? So yeah, anyway, but in any case, they did make some conscious decisions during the production to remove those colors, whatever the reason will be. There's a lot about the casting. We don't really need to touch too much on it because Jeff Most, and I think one of the two of them, if not both, between Jeff Most and Proyas, both said they considered a bunch of actors, but Brandon Lee was the only one they actually made an offer to. And when he accepted the part, they just went with it. We can talk about the talent and the cast, but that is basically how we got to the point where they were making this as a movie.
And the movie did get made, and it was popular enough to get a bunch of sequels.
Yeah.
Review dude Josh, you're a man that watches many shitty sequels. What can you tell me about the Crow sequels?
Well, Corey, have you seen The Crow?
I seen it, yeah.
Well, you've seen all of the sequels.
Unfortunately.
Great.
Yeah, basically, City of Angels starts with a character named Ash who is brutally murdered by a gang of criminals or whatever the fuck with his son. 1 year later, he is brought back by a crow for revenge. The third movie takes a bit of a different take with the formula. A man is wrongfully convicted of murdering his own girlfriend, comes back a year later after being executed, and is brought back by the crow for revenge. So The fourth one picks up, and it's Edward Furlong, our favorite brain scan kid.
Brain Scan's own Edward Furlong. Yeah, that's the one that's like famous because of how bad it is comparatively to the other ones. And as far as I know, the sequels aren't very good, but I think that one's notorious, right,
None of
Josh?
them are very good, yeah.
Oh, yeah, this one is... Well, it's peak depending on how you look at it.
I mashed them. Was Furlong in the same one that Kirsten Dunst and David Boreanaz were in?
I think that's a different one.
That is a different one.
No. David Boreanaz is in the Edward Furlong one.
That's what I thought.
Kirsten Dunst, I believe she's actually in the third one.
That's okay, you're right.
Which is Salvation.
Can I make a repulsive admission right now?
Go ahead.
And then if the two of you want to kick me off the pod after saying this, it's totally fine. City of Angels, garbage movie. I'm not going to tell you it's not a garbage movie, but I actually love the way that movie looks. Like, yeah. I like watching that movie on... You know what would be great? There are DVD releases where you can watch a movie where the dialogue is muted out, but you just hear the music. It's like the score-only version. I would love to watch that movie score-only. It looks great, and it's got some good music. It's just garbage otherwise.
I'll say the actor, Corey, it's your boy Marius from Queen of the Damned.
Oh, yeah.
He looks visually good in the makeup.
What was that actress name? Mia Kirshner, who played Sarah in City of Angels. Is that her name?
Yeah. Oh my God, Sarah's a completely different fucking character.
Completely different character and different. She was in a few things around that time. She had the perfect look. God, she was so pretty. What happened to her?
Right.
Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate Crow sequels. The fourth one, like you said, Corey, is notoriously bad. That one's got, what's her name? Tara Reid.
Oh, God, that is automatically a mark of poor quality. Fuck.
It's got Danny Trejo in it because he's in everything.
I love him, but yeah, he will take anything. I think Walken at one point straight up, and I don't mean this as an insult because I love the guy, but he straight up in an interview at least once has said that he'll basically just take whatever part they offer him enough money for because you never know when your career is going to end and you may as well get the work when it's being offered.
Like, I heard a crow brought you back to life.
Yeah, fuck. Michael Caine. I was in the third or fourth Jaws movie, and it's terrible.
Oh, fourth one.
Fourth one, yeah. And he had a line in an interview. Somebody asked him what he thinks in retrospect about having been in it. He's like, I've actually never watched it, but I bought myself a real nice house with the money I made being in it. So, yeah.
Oh.
All right, well, thank you guys both for that introduction to this movie. Let's get into it. Let's talk about this actual movie. And Steve, I'm hoping you can tell us a little bit about the intro of The Crow on October 30th, Devil's Night.
Yeah. So, Devil's Night is not a thing in the comics. It's never mentioned in the comics. Jeff Most, who'd grown up somewhere in Michigan, was aware of it being a thing. It is actually a real thing, or was, weirdly enough. As a kid, I'd never heard of it. I saw this movie when I was 11 in the theater for the first time, and I actually thought at the time it was something they just made up for the movie. But Jeff Most knew about it, and he wanted to include it as an element, partly because he felt like it tied the film to Detroit. Neither the comic nor the movie ever actually names Detroit. But
the comic does.
I guess it does,
yeah.
But the movie doesn't, and it's just where it's supposed to be set. Devil's Night, a name used in Michigan and other parts of the Midwest for a sort of informal holiday. It happens the night before Halloween on October 30th. I found out looking this up, there are other regional variations of it. It's known as Mischief Night, Goosey Night, and Cabbage Night in some parts of the country. In Baltimore, Maryland, it was traditionally referred to as Moving Night due to a custom involving exchanging or stealing porch furniture and other outside items.
I don't hear anything about fires.
Well, see, that I'm going to mention that right now. In Michigan, particularly within Detroit, the term Devil's Night is closely associated with serious vandalism and arson, which had grown into serious issues by the 1970s. This is a real thing. It was really happening. The destruction peaked in the mid to late 1980s. More than 100 fires were set just on Devil's Night in 1984.
Oh, top dollar, you bastard.
Right? And there was an additional number of fires in the hundreds every subsequent year after 84, all the way up to 2011. So this is a phenomenon that was actually going on somewhat recently. The damage was exacerbated by severe population decline and widespread abandonment of buildings in Detroit during the 1970s and 80s, which accelerated again more recently. So you can imagine what this made Detroit look like. So the film opens on Devil's Night. You are told that it's Devil's Night, which is October 30th, and the city is on fire. The overview of Detroit, as well as a lot of the overview scenes we get later, was done in miniatures. I think it looks incredible. One of this film's biggest successes for me was the fact that it looks and feels like a comic. It doesn't necessarily look and feel quite like the comic it was supposed to be based on, but it does look and feel like a comic. The miniatures add so much to that. It really is incredible. We get this miniature overview of the city. We're flying over the buildings as they're burning. In order to get the flame effects to look right, they built the miniatures around this system that uses these kind of sheer projection screens that you can see through. And they were using those to project flames in between the buildings. And in order to composite the film correctly, they actually had to do dozens of individual passes over this mini cityscape with the flames being composited in order to get the effect. I think it looks really neat. We get this at the same time as a voiceover.
People once believed that when someone dies, a crow carries their soul to the land of the dead. But sometimes, something so bad happens that a terrible sadness is carried with it, and the soul can't rest. Then sometimes, just sometimes, the crow can bring that soul back to put the wrong things right.
The voiceover goes along with our seeing Devil's Night, and it's the voice of, we find out later, Sarah, our 13-year-old character, who's one of the characters in the movie.
I think she specifically says, if your death is so tragic and has the potential for cinematic revenge, the crow will bring you back.
And the truth is, I mean, if that were the case, right, there'd be like millions of people coming back every year. I mean, how many people died tragic, violent deaths?
Like, another crow came back.
Right.
Fucking tired of this shit.
Not again.
What's really funny is, it's either Jeff Most or John Shirley talking about some of their early pre-release screenings. According to them, like 97% of the people they showed the movie to just liked it immediately and never asked the question. But they did say there were a handful of people at the screenings who afterward wanted to know why Eric gets brought back and nobody else ever does. You know, like, it's just one of those things you're not thinking about. Like, how come the Crow wouldn't do this for millions of other people?
No one has ever been more wronged than Eric Draven, Steve.
He was in love, goddammit.
But this segues into a great shot through the miniatures over the city into the gigantic circular window of a third-floor loft where a murder investigation is underway. Or, well, sort of. So one of the parties isn't quite dead yet, but...
Yeah, we get to see Officer Albrecht at the grisly crime scene. You know, there's some cool touches with this movie where, like, it has that noir-style saxophone music kind of playing over him smoking while he investigates the scene. I really like those touches.
Oh, God. I mean, the most hilarious thing about Albrecht in that introductory scene is he's got, like, a half dozen forensic police officers dusting the scene, looking for prints, trying to find evidence. He's fucking standing there with a cigarette.
He's like ashing on the crime scene.
Ashing on the, the molding and everything. And
Oh, I'm sorry, did I ash on that blood stain?
right, and then he decides this is one of my favorite movie tropes, is no one in a movie ever smokes. Well, in certain instances, especially with addict characters, but in a lot of cases, movie characters will not smoke a cigarette. They'll light the cigarette, they'll take about 3 puffs off of it, and then they'll decide they're done with it. Even in 1993, a pack of cigarettes is like $5-6. I don't know why you do that. Take 3 puffs. Anyway, he has a habit of smoking about a third of a cigarette and throwing it away, and he just dumps the butt right on the floor while the forensic cops are investigating.
You guys get that.
Like, fucking Christ.
Someone's like, I found a clue. One of the perps left a cigarette. Oh, that was me.
Sorry, I rolled into that bloodstain.
All right, clear out of here.
Shelly?
Stand back, kid.
Where's Eric?
Just don't worry about it.
Tell him to take care of Sarah.
Look, how will you just lie back? Come on, come on. You, Sarah?
Yeah.
Yeah, look, your sister, she's gonna be okay.
She's not my sister. Shelly just takes care of me. She's my friend. Her and Eric. You lied to her about Eric.
Look, I had to.
And you're lying to me about Shelly. She's gonna die, isn't she?
Hey,
Shelley Webster and Eric Draven have been brutally attacked here in their home, and this whole scene is being observed by a crow, and it's really setting up things to come. And we'll kind of come back to this moment as the movie does, as we go through it a little bit. Josh, I want to go to you because the real movie takes place a year later.
Well, let's just say Officer Albrecht, played by good old Ernie Hudson.
Ernie Hudson, fucking Winston Zeddemore.
Everybody's favorite Ghostbuster.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Venkman fans. It's always Winston.
Winston is so great.
So yeah, 1 year later, Sarah's visiting Eric's grave. If she had just stayed a couple of minutes longer, she would have seen him resurrect.
That would have been cool to see.
Yeah, right? She dipped out. It was about to get good. But he comes out of his grave, pulls himself out, and I guess instinctually knows to just follow this crow, right?
Real quick, I don't want to derail you. I do think it's worth mentioning the last of the scenes they had not shot yet when Brandon died were all for like the first half an hour of the movie. So this scene and several of the others at the beginning may have played out way differently had he not passed away. In any case, go ahead.
Oh, very interesting. Now that you mention it, it is shot very far away and very silhouetted in some shots.
Yeah, in fact, I want to mention this when you're done with your bit, but there's a really important technological moment here, and in some of those shots, you're not actually seeing Brandon.
Yeah, I knew there was some digital trickery, and I was hoping you could point out some of the shots, because I've always wondered that for years. But,
Yeah.
I guess we're also introduced to our villains around this time, right? Should we talk about the villains, or are we going to stay on the crow getting his makeup while The Cure bumps in the background?
I had 3 movie soundtracks growing up that played endlessly, and this was one of the 3.
Yeah, we can talk about those villains a little bit. This night, Devil's Night, is pure chaos, right? In what we know is Detroit, based on one throwaway line where someone says something about Motor City. But there's a lot of chaos going down, and like you said earlier, Josh, much earlier, there is like a RoboCop comparison with like these guys are just pure chaotic evil, and they want to kill and destroy everything. So there is a lot of that going on simultaneously as Eric is pulling himself up out of the grave.
I think to your comparison, another quick note that might really be worth mentioning is that in several of the early drafts of the script, these gang members were being used as a violent front to help corrupt developers empty the tenants out of derelict buildings they wanted to be able to wreck. Which is a lot like OCP using a gang and RoboCop to help fuck up parts of the city they want to redevelop.
There it is.
So,
It's
yeah.
a plot hinted at, but the movie doesn't linger on that plot point too much.
the remnant you're talking about, you're very right. It's a leftover. It's a vestigial detail. They wrote all that in, then they completely rewrote that element totally out of the story, but they left that one little nugget where Top Dollar admits at the end there that he was responsible for what I think he refers to as a little eviction or something like that.
Yeah, the Mark Dacascos show goes heavily into that plot point.
Oh, thank God.
Right.
That's where I want to spend my time, you know?
I will say this. The actor, I don't know his name, somebody can let us know, but the actor that plays Top Dollar in the Mark Dacascos show actually does a really good impression of this guy.
Michael Wincott is one of the greatest character actors who has ever lived.
It's like, how is he not blown up, man?
Right? I don't understand. And he's played these amazing parts. If you look at his resume, he's had these incredible bit parts in so many movies, like some of which have been major award-winning films. He is a crazy actor. He chews up the scenery. He nailed this part just like he nailed all the others. There's another very similar character actor, Tom Noonan. I really want the two of them to play brothers in a movie.
Say hello to the last fellow who wouldn't cooperate with me.
What are you telling me? You tell me this thing is real?
All the power in the world resides in the eyes, fella. Sometimes more useful than people who bear it.
This guy's voice is so fucking cool.
It is. God, he is absolutely, I agree with you. The gang members in this movie especially just chew this movie up. Like, Brandon's great in it, don't get me wrong, but David Patrick Kelly and Michael Wincott are both just incredible.
Oh my God, David Patrick Kelly.
And Grange, the actor from Candyman. Now I'm blanking on his name.
Tony Todd.
Yeah, Tony Todd. Yes, he is fantastic. Love him.
You out of your motherfucking mind, man.
Look at that.
Pussy's drink last, man. Fuck you, Tin.
This shit ain't even loaded, man. This one is.
Which of you Motor City motherfuckers wants to bet me this one isn't? Hey! Fire it up! 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 Fire it up!
Where's your shooters? Put your guns away, huh, guys?
Oh yeah, the villains really shine in this movie. They're partially responsible for why the movie's so special.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, I think they're really the ones overall that steal the show.
And we'll talk about the villains in a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I think we get some really great scenes with them as we go through the story. But for now, Eric is coming back to life. And this is a man that is disheveled, confused, but also pretty fucking jacked for a man that has been dead for a year.
Yeah. During the sequence where he's making his way back to his apartment during the apartments is where we see a lot of the CG added in, if we want to touch on that.
Yeah.
I think it's an important element. This is one of the first instances of him ever having done this in a film. Legitimately very weird that it ended up happening on what was otherwise a pretty low-budget film. Brandon's death happened at a point where they had not finished shooting several scenes for the beginning of the movie, and it led to a lot of debate over whether or not they were going to finish shooting at all, and they had to bring in additional writers and start doing a lot of rewrites to figure out how they could do it. But everyone agreed, even with all the rewrites, there were just moments for the beginning that, like, they needed him to be there. Somebody on the crew, some of the producers, I guess, found a company I think is worth mentioning. They were called DreamQuest Images. They won a bunch of Oscars. They were founded in 1979. This special effects company's resume is nuts. Like the Coppola movie One from the Heart, Blade Runner, the Twilight Zone movie, Gremlins, Buckaroo Banzai, The Abyss, Total Recall, Pee-wee's Big Adventure, 2 of the National Lampoon's Vacation movies, the original Short Circuit, Captain EO and Moonwalker with Michael Jackson, Scrooged with Bill Murray, 3 of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, the original Predator, The Lost Boys, Toys, The Mask with Jim Carrey, Waterworld, The Rock, Con Air, Armageddon, The Sixth Sense, Bicentennial Man, Stigmata, Tim Burton's version of Planet of the Apes, Reign of Fire, the Dragon movie. These are just the ones I picked out. Like,
okay, so they worked on a couple of movies.
yeah, like, this company is nuts. They eventually got purchased by Disney and then folded, but the producers went to them. They found ways to snip footage of Brandon out of other scenes and composite him onto new footage, which today would not be a big deal, but at the time was a gigantic thing. This was the first movie they'd ever done this with. Lucas did a little bit of it 4 years later for the special editions of Star Wars. There's a moment you can really tell is it, if you're looking for it, when he's coming through the doorway in his apartment, because it's footage they snipped of him walking through the alleyway before he finds the boots, and he's kind of crumpled over and trembling. They just took about 30 seconds worth of footage from there and made it look like he was then walking into the apartment. There were some droplets of water on him they wanted to make look more natural, so they added digital droplets of water to the door frame to make it look like the building was leaking so that it would match. When they got to the scene where he's hunched over his mirror doing his makeup, that's his stunt double's body, but with his face digitally composed. From what I understand, this is the second time they had ever done that, but I don't remember what the first moment was. But it was actually more advanced here because they had to take the footage and then find ways to digitally add in the cracks from the mirror so that it would look like he was looking at a fractured reflection, which they did extremely well. And then there's one last moment where he's got the makeup on, he's wearing his outfit, and he's standing at this broken out window, which is the window he got thrown to his death from. And there's a flash of light, and you see his face. Again, that's his stunt double's body with his face composited over it. And there would have been a lot more footage of him in the beginning of the film if he'd lived, but this was huge, especially for a big budget movie. Nobody had ever done this kind of thing before, and it was very interesting for people to try to pick out where those moments were when it happened.
I think it's seamless. I watched this movie knowing that Brandon Lee was not available to film all his scenes because unfortunately he died while making the movie. Very common knowledge, I think. But I did not notice the moments where it wasn't him, and I think that's just a credit to the filmmaking. They did a great job.
Yeah, I mean, especially considering 1993 technology and blah, blah, blah. This was a low budget movie. I mean, Proyas and Jeff Most both talk endlessly in their commentaries about how many things they either had to do in a weird way or not do at all or take out because they didn't have budget for it. And the fact that they made this work is really incredible.
I guess that answers a thing that I've always kind of felt in this opening. Like, he just wakes up disheveled. He seems very confused. He's just following the crow. And before he starts putting on the makeup, it's like, he does that swing through the window. And he looks down at his hands and they heal. And it's at that moment he's like, oh, I can heal. Well, I guess I better go murder the fuck out of these guys now.
Yeah, I know, right?
I
love that.
You're dead on, absolutely. And Most talks about this. Jeff Most talks about it in his commentary. Like, Eric in the comic gets some degree of instruction from the bird. He and the bird talk in the comic that doesn't go on here. In this one, in the film, he seems not to have any idea why he's back until things start happening. And one of the first things he seems to just innately figure out is that in this version of the story, the bird is the one guiding him, and he needs to follow it to figure out where to be and where to go next. The bird in this version is also how he finds his way to play. They don't even show you in the comic how he gets from one place to the other. In this, it's like he's following the bird, and he has the moment where the bird drags him back to the apartment, and he finds the cat, he touches the cat, and then he remembers the murders. But you're absolutely right. This whole Most very specifically addresses the element you mentioned in his commentary, where they're trying to underline constantly that when Eric gets resurrected in the movie, He doesn't know why. He doesn't even really understand what's happening. He's depending on these moments where the bird shows him where he needs to be, and the moments where he touches things like the cat to get the memories to be like, oh, this is what I'm here for.
Absolutely. He's a man on a quest for revenge, and we know the reason why, and I think we, the audience, are on his side for this because we've seen these villains, and they're just absolute pieces of shit. We've seen his memories, and they're horrific. And more memories come throughout the movie, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah.
I think a lesser movie might just kind of give us a basic overview of what happened through one flashback at the beginning.
They would show the entire scene in this moment. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
But this movie, to its credit, it gives us bits of flashbacks as we go on. And I think the flashbacks in this, much like in the comic, are very touching. I really do feel for these people that are just two young people that have kind of a beautiful relationship that are brutally killed for basically no reason.
I love you.
Say that again.
I love you.
Oh boy.
Restaurant.
Wow, you look great.
Maybe it's just me, maybe it's a nitpick, but that final shot, the lightning lights up and shows off his face and you get that money shot, like, are his boots tied? Because they look loose. How are they staying on his feet?
He doesn't have them tied the entire movie, which is very interesting. Brandon, to his credit, was super duper involved with wanting to be at the forefront of how they interpreted that character for the movie and really wanted most of it to just be left to him. And a lot of those little costume touches were him. I'm not sure if the boots were or not, but like he got Proyas and the producers to agree that over the course of production, he was allowed to put cuts and abrasion marks on the costume at his own discretion and tape the costume in places at his own discretion. He was doing it with the jacket too because they felt that it made it look more like Eric really was just patching the thing up himself as he went versus having professional costuming people do
That's
it.
a nice touch.
Right, exactly. Where it always, because you get the professionals do it, it'll look professional, but it's also going to look like a professional did it.
Exactly.
You know, it's not really what you want. There's another interesting touch point in that regard regarding his makeup. Unfortunately, they didn't come to some of these decisions about the makeup until they were so late in production. It wasn't a consistent element. But Proyas and Brandon both agreed that his makeup always looked the best at the end of the day when it had been exposed to moisture and sweat and the set and dust and whatever else, because it looked like he was living in it. And the whole point is supposed to be that Eric isn't redoing the makeup every day. He's just sort of keeping it on as he goes. And they had a lot of discussions about how to let it age and how to make it appear. I'm going to do this one more time. There's a snippet in IMDb that claims that along these lines that Brandon was going home in the evening and sleeping in the makeup to make it look more aged. Proyas mentions this in his commentary. According to Proyas, he was not actually doing that. Proyas says that Brandon wanted to do it at one point, that it was an idea they discussed that if he went home and slept in his makeup, it would look more real, but according to Alex Proyas, that never actually happened. So, anyway. Yeah.
I just get flashes of Edward Furlong in the fourth movie using a Sharpie to do his makeup.
Oh my god. Yeah, absolutely.
It's a Sharpie. Like, oh man, it's poetic.
Well, Eric Draven's makeup that he does is iconic. His whole look is iconic from this movie. Mm-hmm. I think it was like a joke in South Park that it's like always someone's Halloween costume, right? There's always some guy that wants to be Eric Draven the Crow.
Sting, the wrestler from WWF, basically ripped it off.
He did, but it wasn't even his idea. Sting, actually, I'll tell a little bit about this. He used to have a totally different, like, visual aesthetic. He had short blonde hair. It was like a flat top.
Oh, yeah.
And he was kind of like a surfer guy with Ultimate Warrior style colorful face paint. But when they were transitioning in WCW, Razor Ramon, Scott Hall, told him, you know, you should try doing it like Goth, like the Crow. He basically told him, you should do it like the Crow. And he did, and it looked really good with his face, so they kind of like worked that into his character, and they made him this like mysterious guy in the rafters still called Sting, but now more like the Crow. So absolutely, it was lifted from that in wrestling, and you know, I think this look, it's easy to make fun of, but in the context of this movie, looks fucking beautiful. I love the way he looks in this movie.
Yeah. The whole point of it really is that when he's sitting at the mirror, he's staring at a tragedy mask and he mimics it. It's a tragedy mask. Like that.
Was there a Sharpie nearby?
But like anyone who doesn't get that looking at it might want to reassess whether they can even watch movies at an adult level. Like that's the whole, though it's a tragedy mask makeup.
Right. It's like the classic theater masks, like the two masks, the tragedy and the comedy mask, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, obviously he lifts it from that. We see that very clearly in the movie, but I think he looks fucking cool as hell.
He does.
You know, I think his physicality is amazing in this movie. And not too long after he gets his Raiden-style new look, he catches up with a fella named Tintin that did him wrong, doesn't he, Josh?
The fuck you all painted up for, crackhead, huh? Halloween ain't till mañana.
Yes, he does. And he really likes his coat.
Yeah.
Like the jacket.
What you all painted up for, crackhead?
Yeah, Halloween ain't till mañana, so... I'd like to say Tintin is Lord Nikon from Hackers.
Lord Nikon, Lawrence Mason.
Oh my god, what an awesome actor, right?
Yes, I was just going to say the same thing. He's great.
Man, what the fuck you want, man?
Why don't you tell me a story? A man and a woman in law a year ago. Motherfucking mine.
Listen!
I'm sure you'll remember. You killed them. On Halloween.
Yeah, okay. Halloween, yeah. Some dude, some bitch, whatever, man.
Her name was Shelley. You cut her. You raped her.
Shelley, yeah. Yeah, I shanked her pink ass and she loved it.
Tintin is a man that likes to kill people with knives, you know?
Yeah.
These guys got their gimmick. One of their gimmicks is just I'm a drug addict, which is pretty funny. But
well, and that was really them. Worth mentioning right this moment, I guess that was really them in the comic. In the comic, there was no real estate. There was nothing. It was Top Dollar was basically just the top end of this drug dealing organization. In my memory, they were all just addicts. Like there really wasn't much more to it than that. There was no grand conspiracy there. They were just shitty people who committed murder sometimes for drug money.
No, we got to make it way more deep. The audience won't be on board.
I think that's one of the big key differences to your point is that like the comic is very much Eric is the only character you really need to care about, and all the development happens with him. Everyone else, like the bad guys in the comic, really are just there to be killed, which is fine with me. But like that, yeah.
Steve, did you enjoy seeing Eric take down the first of the goons, which is Tintin?
I really like Brandon Lee, and I really like Brandon Lee's performance in this movie, and I don't want anyone to think that I'm being overly negative. There are a couple of moments where I think he embellishes it a little bit too much and gets a little awkward, and parts of his fight with Tintin are among those areas, but I think it's great overall. He and Lawrence Mason are both fantastic in it. It's a little bit different than the fight. Well, he's different. Tintin's a little different than in the comic. The comic, he's got the shaved head.
Do they pop bullets like pills in the comic?
Corey
No.
just reread it, but yeah, I don't remember that scene existing in the comic.
That's really the only reason I want to talk about the bar scene. What the fuck is up with that?
Right? Dude, I've seen this movie so many times. I have all the dialogue from that scene committed to memory. Like, friends of mine were already making fun of me for this when I was 13, and I'm 40. Like, I got most of that dialogue fucking memorized.
Well, fire it up.
Right? Fire it up. The Tintin.
Fire it up.
They do some of this in the film as well, but Tintin in the comic really has a moment where he finally gets fucking scared. He chucks one of the knives at Eric, lands in Eric's shoulder, and Eric just keeps talking. And he pulls the knife out of his shoulder and sticks his tongue out and just slices his tongue open with the blade, and then walks up to Tintin and hands the knife back to him and asks him if he'd like another throw. And in that moment, in the way it's drawn in the panel, Tintin's face just goes dead. He's like, no, I know, I understand now that I'm finished. I kind of wish they'd gone that way with it, but it's great.
I do too. That sounds so fucking awesome.
It was so intense. Holy shit, it's one of the most intense scenes I've ever read in a comic book in my life. But yeah, it was great in the movie though. Their fight's awesome.
I guess it would the practicality of splitting a tongue, maybe.
Yeah, it would have been a difficult effect to make look convincing. And Eric's different in the movie anyway. Eric in the movie is they wanted to make him a handyman at one point, which thank God they didn't do, and they decided to make him a musician, which I think is good for him. But Eric in the comic is like a literary freak, like a poet. He spends a lot of the time just reciting poetry.
Oh, the comic is so poetic.
Yeah.
He's a drama nerd.
It's peppered with like Arthur Rimbaud and song lyrics. There's a lot of really cool elements because reading it's one of those trippy experiences reading the comic where it's not like a very straightforward start to finish movie structure style story.
Yes.
It is what it is, and it's like you're in this world, and it's like this mysterious world with like where the story is being told through poems that they've randomly selected.
Right.
It's quite nice.
It really is.
But I do want to keep our focus on this movie because as much as I think the comic is cool, I think this movie has a lot going for it, and I love the first confrontation. I think if you're into this fight with Tintin and Eric, then you're in for this movie, because that's what a lot of this movie is. It's his revenge story. It's him getting revenge brutally on a brutal group of thugs that really did him wrong, and I just love everything about this, really. Like, even the first way that he confronts Tintin, the way he goes from the top of the building to the ground level, is he just dives off the building.
Yeah, it's great.
And he falls, and this would kill a man, and he just lays there and he laughs. And the movie is framed beautifully. Like, I love the cinematography of it. And it gets very, like, musical in nature, right? They start to, like, pump the 90s 9 Inch Nails or hard rock, whatever it is, and I think it just plays out wonderfully.
I think that's what's so fun about this movie, particularly the escapism, because normally when a character is invincible, like literally there are no stakes, but you don't really care because you just want him to murder the fuck out of these people. When you get the Tintin scene, you see what this movie is going to be. If you're on board, you're on board, because the rest of the movie, like, kind of plays out the same, like, energy-wise.
Yeah, good point. Very good point. And one of the things I love about Eric is, I mean, I know it's not like poetry like in the comics, but, like, he has great bits of dialogue that he says to people. He's, like, eerie and mysterious, the things he says, and he's, like, off-putting, the things he says, and he's got a great voice when he has the makeup on and he's being intimidating. He says to Tintin,
Victims, aren't we all?
Yeah, I love it. I'm here for it, man.
Before he murders Tintin, we get the introduction of the pawn shop owner Gideon.
Gideon, yeah.
And after he murders Tintin, he goes right back to see Mr. Gideon. And I think this is probably one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie.
John Polito chews that fucking scene up. He is fantastic.
Oh my God, it's so good.
He is so good. He's always good. He is great. He is another one of the supporting cast of this movie. He's fucking fantastic.
Piss off! We're closed! Gerardo! Go sleep it off somewhere else, Dusthead. Unless you want to get mutilated. Goddamn creatures in the night. They never learn. Hey! Hey!
Suddenly, I heard a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door.
What are you talking about?
You heard me rapping, right?
You're trespassing. And you owe me a fucking new door.
I'm looking for something in an engagement ring. Gold.
You're looking for a coroner. Shit for brains. Oh, shit. Oh, shit on me. Shit on me. Shit on me!
Mr. Gideon.
Who?
I'm not paying attention. I repeat, a gold engagement ring, yes? It was pawned here a year ago by a customer of yours named Tintin. He confided in me before he ran out of breath.
Man, he sells absolutely that pain of being like stabbed in the hand and shit like that.
And it's almost verbatim from the comic. That sequence is the closest thing from the whole movie to the comic book.
Yeah, you were saying, oh man, that now I've got to read the comic.
It's so cool.
I love the moment of the scene where he's hanging upside down and he's Mr. Gideon, you're not paying attention, and he just bonks him on the head with his own gun.
Right. Well, because Eric comes in with a goal, right? He's there for a ring. And Gideon's freaking out, like pulling a gun on him, like, get the fuck out of here. And he's like, I'm here for an engagement ring. Like, Eric doesn't miss a beat. Like, he's just, I'm here for this. And then Gideon, you're not paying attention. Like,
you know, Gideon starts off being so blasé because he's used to dealing with these people. You see the way he interacts with Tintin. He doesn't give a shit. He just figures that Eric's some dust addict.
Right, I get the feeling that Gideon's like protected, like his business is protected, so he doesn't have to like take shit from anybody.
No, he probably figures he can go to Top Dollar whenever. In fact, after the shop blows up and T-Bird goes and tells Top Dollar's first response is, I didn't give anyone permission to do that.
Right.
So,
exactly. Brandon Lee is so playful in his performance and getting revenge on these characters. Like, he kind of enjoys it to an extent, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a very good point, because there's one moment, and they cut away from it really quick, but I'm glad I saw it. It's much later on when Eric is surrounded by cops, and they tell him to, you know, put your hands in the air, reach for the sky, or whatever the fuck cops say. It isn't freeze, whatever it is, but he sticks his hands up in the air, and then he does like a little jig and like exits stage right. Like,
yeah, he's not some like Batman, you know what I mean? Where he's just this emotionless revenge monster or something. He's playful with it. Like, he's kind of getting off on the revenge aspect of it.
He's here for the killing and the theatrics.
Yes.
Yeah. He's a showman.
You have one chance to live.
Look, man, take anything you want.
Thank you.
Take anything!
Now you're gonna tell me where to find the rest of Tintin's little party pals.
Okay, they all hang out at the pit. Little T-Birds, little potato heads hang out there. And Fun Boy, he lives there upstairs, all right?
Fun Boy.
whole jolly club. Jolly pirate nickname.
Jesus Christ, an attack!
Hold still. Each one of these is a life. A life you helped destroy.
Come back, all right? Don't kill me.
I'm not gonna kill you. Your job will be to tell the rest of them that death is coming for them. Tonight. Tell them Eric Draven sends his regards.
Walk out of here. They're gonna erase your sorry ass. You're nothing but street grease, you heard? Street grease, you motherfucker.
Is that gasoline I smell?
No, man. No! No!
Even though they didn't do it in the same way, I do think that's an element of the comic, like we were talking about the poetry, that they did successfully, at least to a degree, translate, is that he's there for a performative aspect.
Yeah.
You know? But, and then really quick, because I think it's funny to point out, he goes from killing Tintin to Gideon's pawn shop to get the engagement ring, which he eventually gets. We can talk more about that if we want to, but it culminates with him blowing up Gideon's pawn shop. Albrecht, Ernie Hudson's character, is near enough by, eating with Sarah, that he's there for the... Oh, no, that was the arcade. But no, he does show up.
He does show up.
He does show up. It's just not that he was eating with Sarah, but he does show up. He bumps into the Crow, and while he's got Eric on the street at gunpoint, some people start looting the pawn shop. There's a funny-looking guy with long blonde hair kind of waddling his way out of the pawn shop with a television set. That's James O'Barr.
Okay.
They wanted to make sure they squoze him into the movie somewhere, so that's James leaving the pawn shop with a TV set.
Who, as you mentioned earlier, is the comic book creator.
Yes, the creator, yeah.
Gideon also tells him, you know, take whatever you want, and Eric's like, all right, cool. Just casually picks up a guitar.
Yeah, he takes the guitar, and that's going to be the callback for him being a musician, and we get to see what's supposed to be Eric playing guitar. So a quick trivia note, Brandon actually did learn to play a little guitar so that for one of those scenes he could play for himself. There's a second scene later in the movie where it was way too complicated for him, and it's actually the guy they hired to be his guitar teacher. We see the guitar teacher's hands playing the guitar.
I see.
Speaking of music in this movie...
Oh my god, this soundtrack. Fuck.
This soundtrack is a vibe. I mean, a lot of this stuff is not particularly music I'm into anymore, but if I had been a super fan of The Crow in the late 90s, you bet your ass I'd be playing this shit all the time.
I was playing it all the time. I still play it all the time. I'm still a huge fan of a lot of the bands that are on the soundtrack. I had 3 movie soundtracks that played endlessly at my house, to the point that my mother would frequently tell me to put headphones on because she was sick of hearing them, and this was one of the 3. Like,
it was one of the big 3. So the music is playing in a scene at a 90s alt-rock nightclub, and there's a band called Medicine that's playing the show. They're basically Poor Man's Hole, in my opinion. They're like...
see, I like them better than Hole.
All right, to each his own. But this is the head villain's lair, and I want to talk about him a little bit more right here, because this is really where we meet him. I know you guys talked about the actor earlier, and the actor's great. This villain is like a true comic book villain, but not this comic book's villain.
Yeah, exactly.
He's not a villain from this comic.
Right.
He's just a villain from a comic.
Yeah.
This dude is insane.
He is.
This guy went through a goth phase in high school and never let it go. He is a true goth, to the point when you first see him in his gothed out, decadent room, it looks like he's staring into a crystal ball.
Dude, there's a whole movement in music referred to as post-punk, and the artists who fall into it are a little varied, but Susie and the Banshees is considered a post-punk group, and I believe that he is a post-punk artist. Like, he's taken goth to that next level. He's a post-punk villain.
He's what your parents think you will become if you start being goth.
Yeah.
You'll start like putting an eyeball in a chalice and light it on fire.
Hanging out in an Art Deco apartment.
And dating your sister.
And dating your Asian sister.
Well, and that was so weird. Like, she's clearly, Bailan, clearly, I think that's her name, is clearly a Chinese woman. When I first saw this movie, when I first saw this movie, I was 11. But when I first saw the movie at 11, he makes that comment. I immediately assumed he wasn't being literal and that he was saying it to shock people. Like, this guy's just such a weird creep that he would say that to other people. But now I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's like, on one hand, he's definitely an edgelord.
Right.
But on the other hand, he is about it. He's not a poser.
No.
This guy.
No.
Yeah, I see. One of the most important things I learned from my sister.
Sister? She's supposed to be your sister?
My father's daughter. That's right. What's the matter? You don't see the resemblance? Well, let's take it from the top, friend. Got a lot of detail. What do you say?
He had a bird with him. Nearly pecked my face off. He told me to tell T-Bird that death was on its way, whatever the fuck that means. And Draven. He said his name was Eric Draven. Want to relax that thing now?
And this bird, man, he just happened to let you live, huh? You're sure you ain't making all of this up just to save your own ass?
I ain't making all this up. I ain't twisted like you two fucks.
All right. Boy and his bird. Awful touching. For fuck's sake, die, will you? Give me that thing.
There are several different religions and mythical concepts that actually do associate a huge amount of power to the eyes, and that's where it's supposed to be coming from with him, so yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this guy, he has like his own mystical, he's got the leather-bound goth Asian girlfriend who is stone cold, and he's got a huge plate of cocaine.
Oh my god, that huge plate of cocaine.
That is more cocaine than I have ever seen.
Made Clarence Boddicker blush.
You know what? You're right about that. I got that's a lot of cocaine, even by 90s drug lord movie standards.
That's a lot.
I mean, fuck.
So we do get to meet him, and we'll talk more about this villain kind of later on in the movie because he has a bigger role to play later. I like that they set him up leading up to his scenes. Like, we get to see him here, we get to see him there.
His office and the nightclub were both built inside of an abandoned cement factory in North Carolina, and they had to shoot during the winter, and it was fucking frigid, and it was apparently very uncomfortable for all
An
of them.
abandoned cement factory, you say? The same one that they used in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles?
And potentially one of the same buildings that Robo and ends up at after what Boddiger's crew fucks him up so badly. Like, Detroit's very much about, even though this is North Carolina, Detroit is very much about disused factories.
Well, I know that, there's been a abandoned factory in North Carolina that was used in a bunch of movies in the 90s. I don't know if it's the same one or if they just got a bunch of them out there.
It could be the same one. And they used an abandoned reactor core tower for some of the underwater sequences in the Abyss, and I think it might have been out there too. Yeah.
There's a big fucking bird over there.
It's a squab.
Come here, bird. The bird. The bird. Birdie. Come here. Birdie.
Here, fun boy.
What the fuck? Man, don't do that! You nearly gave me a fucking heart attack. Don't sweat it. It's time for you to take your bird and leave, Frico.
took your shot, fun boy. You got me dead bang.
You seriously fucked up. But you're looking new. You need professional help.
Bingo! He shots! He scored!
Next on the list is Fun Boy, who's actually like about to bang Sarah's mom. They're shooting up morphine. Even growing up, like this guy's acting when he's acting high, like is really fucking good.
Michael Massey is a great actor.
Yeah, when the crow shows up, like it's so fucking convincing that you would just be like, look, it's a fucking squawk. What?
This is another scene that it's very different in a lot of ways from the comic, but parts of it got aped really well. There were certain aspects of the scene that look a lot like the comic, him being in bed and stuff. The Sarah character doesn't exist in the comics. A little girl named Elle, he only meets for a little while. He meets her outside Fun Boy's apartment building. Her mother is the equivalent for the woman here, for Darla. And Eric finds her in Fun Boy's apartment doing drugs and sort of helps her a little bit. It's another element they don't have here in the comic. If I remember correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, but he's told you're not here to fuck around with mortal people, and every time you do it, it detracts a little from your power. Something to that effect. And he keeps doing it anyway. But yeah, it's a good scene, really good scene. Michael Massey, sadly, is the actor that fired the shot that killed Brandon.
Let's put a pin on Fun Boy and talk about the shot that killed Brandon, because it's something, Steve, that I only know vaguely about, and I feel like you probably know more about it.
Yeah. Well, Steven Segal knows the most about it, so I've heard.
I have no idea what version of that story he was actually telling people. There were rumors for a long time that I remember that the shot happened. There's a huge fight scene where Eric shows up at Top Dollar's office where he's got a bunch of other gang leaders there. There's a giant shootout, but that's not actually where it happened. They had a bunch of prop guns on the set. Well, they were real guns on the set. One of them, a Smith & Wesson revolver, had been used for some close-up shots, and they'd had it loaded with dummy rounds. And the dummy rounds they were using were not properly made. Just put it like that. There's a lot of detail here. I don't think it's worth trudging into too much, but they weren't properly made, and they still had bullets have there's a bullet, there's powder, and there's a primer. These dummies did not have any powder, so they wouldn't have fired like a normal bullet, but the actual bullet and the primer were still there, and they really should not have been there, but they were there for close-ups. And at some point, somebody on the set, I really don't know who, I just know that the crew stated that this happened. Somebody was playing around with that prop gun, and they were pulling the trigger. And when they pulled the trigger, this is not what killed Brandon in this moment, but when they pulled the trigger, because there was no powder in the dummy rounds, the bullet didn't fire completely. But there was primer. And the primer created just enough of an explosion to force the bullet into the barrel of the gun where it got stuck, because there wasn't enough power to force it all the way out. And this happened because somebody on the set was dicking around with a gun. There's a scene where Eric walks in on Shelley being raped and assaulted, and he gets shot. Eric gets shot. The day they were shooting that scene, Michael Massey's character, Fun Boy, Michael Massey, was given the gun, the same Smith & Wesson revolver to use to fire at Eric. The firearms expert they hired, for some ridiculous reason, had been sent home for the day. That person should never have agreed to leave when he knew they were going to be using firearms. People on the set should never have allowed firearms to be used without him around. They made some assistant responsible for handling the firearms who did not know what he was doing. If somebody had bothered to check, they would have noticed that this .45 Magnum or .40 caliber, whatever it was, revolver had a piece of bullet lodged in its barrel because somebody had been fucking around with it while it had a dummy round in it, but nobody checked. And when you're firing blanks, the blanks don't have a bullet, but they do have the powder because you need them to go bang. So this gun gets loaded with blanks, which had been made on set, not in the correct way. Michael Massey was shooting the scene. He's playing fun boy. He's the one that fires the shot at Eric. So Michael Massey points this revolver at Eric and pulls the trigger. It goes bang. It's supposed to go bang because it has a blank round in it. Brandon collapses on the set. Everyone thinks he's acting. Alex Proyas calls cut. Brandon doesn't get up. And after a minute or two, people start realizing something is wrong, and when they look, it becomes obvious that Brandon is bleeding a lot from his abdomen. The piece of bullet that got lodged in this gun while somebody was dicking around with it, and that did not get noticed because nobody bothered to inspect the firearm before it got used again. This piece of bullet got dislodged from the barrel of the gun when the blank fired and hit Brandon in the abdomen. And it caused a lot of internal damage, and he was apparently barely still alive when they loaded him on a gurney and dead by the time he got to the hospital. It was a tragic accident, and apparently really fucked Michael Massey up for a long time. He wouldn't act again for over a year afterward. He's still, to this day, in some circles, more known as the actor who accidentally shot Brandon Lee than anything else.
It's not his fault, though, clearly.
It really was not his fault. Like, it was 3 other people's job to check that weapon and make sure it was being used properly, and none of them bothered, or just weren't there. And, yeah, so...
I guess I shouldn't say it's not his fault. I should say it's mostly not his fault.
Yeah, I mean,
you could say, I'm not doing this without the weapons guy around.
Right.
So there's some level of responsibility.
Right, yeah, I mean, I guess you could legitimately make an argument even Massey didn't bother to ask whether that firearm was safe before he fired it. On the other hand, I think kind of goes to what happened recently with Alec Baldwin, because people said the same thing about him with that incident on the Rust set, that he should have checked the weapon, and his argument the whole time has been, if 3 or 4 other people inspect it and hand it to me and the weapons expert says it's fine, you can use it, it's safe, go ahead and do it, I'm going to assume that it's fine. I'm not going to assume I'm going to kill somebody with it. So,
sure.
You know. But anyway, yeah, so that was unfortunately the way that he died. He had 3 days left to shoot at the time that it happened. His death really cast into question whether or not they were even going to bother finish. I mentioned earlier they had to bring in new screenwriters and rewrite parts. This is why they ended up digitally compositing him into scenes that had otherwise not been shot. Paramount Pictures, which was supposed to distribute the movie up to that point, decided they did not want to be involved anymore. They dropped out completely and basically said it's on you guys to figure out if this movie even gets released. Miramax had to come in and buy the movie up and inject an additional like $8 million in funding so they could get through the rewrites and the effects work. But yeah, that's unfortunately how Brandon passed away. And some people were critical after the fact, saying, you know, the violent content of the movie and blah, 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 and that it was inappropriate that they released it. But Eliza, his fiance, as well as his sister and mother all agreed that Brandon would have wanted the movie to come out.
It's his best performance.
It is his best performance. It's one thing, and I'm not saying people were wrong. One thing I do find a little interesting, and I texted Corey a little bit about this. A lot of people seem to think this is going to be the breakthrough performance that launched him into Hollywood. And people could be right. I could definitely be wrong about this. I've just always found that contention a little hard to swallow, only because he'd been in 2 bigger budget action movies before this. One
Rapid Fire.
Yeah, Rapid Fire and Showdown in Little Tokyo, which had Dolph Lundgren in it.
Yeah, oh, I love Showdown in Little Tokyo, but for the wrong reasons.
Right. In fact, I think you may come visit at some point. If you do, I can take you to where that opening scene was shot in Little Tokyo. We can have some Japanese food. But
shit, yeah.
Those movies got panned. They didn't do very well. This was a low-budget movie. It kind of got ignored when it came out. I would prefer to believe that I'm wrong, but I've always had a little difficulty believing this really would have launched him, because I don't think this movie even would have gotten as much attention as it did if he hadn't died making it. And I don't mean that in a shitty way. It's just, but anyway, he's great in it.
I think he's great in it. I love his look. I love his voice. I love his physicality. I am on the other side. I think Brandon Lee definitely would have been a big star after this, because this movie is fucking great. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about my experience with this movie. I saw it as a kid, passingly, probably just parts of it, and I remember thinking it was all right. Then as an adult, I watched it while I was drunk, and same thing. I had this vague memory of it being like, all right. I watched it again for this podcast. I gave it the podcast watch, the full focused attention watch. And I fucking love this movie.
Oh, so do I. Yeah, absolutely.
It took me until now to realize that, though. And I love Brandon Lee in it. And I'm going to take us back into the Fun Boy scene, Josh. What is Eric doing to Fun Boy here?
Well, he's fucking with him. That's what he's doing.
Yeah, it's classic.
I love the joke that he actually tells Fun Boy, because Fun Boy tries to shoot him and he heals up, and then after seeing that this guy can't be killed, Fun Boy says, Jesus Christ, and he's like, stop me if you've heard this one.
Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ. Stop me if you heard this one. Jesus Christ walks into a hotel. He hands the innkeeper 3 nails and he asks, don't you ever fucking die? You put me up for the night? Does that hurt?
I've tried retelling that joke a few times over the years and learned that most other people consider it to be an extremely bad taste.
Yeah.
They do not like hearing it.
Fuck them.
All right?
What? That's weird. That's so weird.
It's right out of the comic, and it's really great.
It is.
I love that. Again, it's the theatrics of Eric that kind of go hand in hand with like his coolness.
Especially in this one, when he's in the apartment in the beginning, reliving his memory of being killed, at the point where he gets shot by Massey, all of a sudden you see 2 bullet holes develop in his back. His back is clearer before then, and then he kind of arches in pain, and you can see the 2 bullet holes suddenly appear in his back. That's Eric's stigmata.
Absolutely.
You know? That was his crucifixion. So, yeah.
So we got the Jesus character figured out. I won't do that.
Right off the bat. Yeah, you can't even argue it on this one.
Yeah.
So, I guess, like, the point of the 10-10 scene was to relish in the revenge taking, but that's not so much the case in this scene. This scene is more about getting Sarah's mother on the right track, because Fun Boy is basically killed off camera, and it's a little underwhelming in context to the rest of the crew getting picked off, you know?
So, funny story real quick. They actually filmed a much, much bigger scene where Eric slowly injects every syringe he can find in that apartment into Fun Boy. It was a much bigger fight. They actually filmed the scene. If you watch the deleted footage on either the Blu-ray or the DVD, it is there. The whole scene's there. But
wow.
They ended up trimming it. They couldn't get it finished the way they wanted. Proyas specifically says that he and Brandon spent days trying to plan out how it was going to go, and that even after multiple takes, neither of them was happy with the way it worked. And because of that, and for pacing reasons, they ended up deciding to trim it down to just what you ended up getting. But he did have a bigger death in the comic, too.
Well, I mean, that one always worked for me, though, because, I mean, it's a different point of the scene. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I agree with you. And I like the fact that, like, the first guy has a bunch of knives in his chest when all is said and done. And this guy, he's got, like, the syringes.
Yeah.
You know? I just like that he's kind of, like, taking what they love and using it against them in a weird way.
He does it for everyone. He ends up killing T-Bird with explosives. The only one whose death isn't real specific is Skank, because Skank's not real specific. He's just kind of there.
He's just kind of like a douchey creep.
Right?
Yeah, he's like the leftovers, for real.
I love him, though. At the Angel, I can't remember his last name. The guy's first name is Angel. He was really good in that part.
But yeah, Eric does talk to Darla, and he says, Darla, you should go make eggs for your daughter sometime because she's hungry.
One interesting thing I gleaned real quickly from the commentary on this one, I always understood, even at 11, that he was squeezing the heroin out of her arm and sort of clearing her up. But Jeff Most in his commentary says that he always interpreted the scene in such a way that Eric was not only evacuating the heroin from her system in that moment, but that his power made it possible for, like, in that moment, she was just clean. It was like she'd gone through the sobriety process. All of a sudden, she just wasn't an addict anymore. That was his interpretation of what was happening. So that was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, he's got some very interesting powers as, I guess, the Crow. He's never called the Crow, really, in this movie. He's Eric Draven.
It's funny. Proyas actually talks a lot about that in the commentary. Eric Eric's name is not the Crow.
He's Eric Draven.
Yeah, he's Eric Draven. The Crow does not refer to Eric at any point. The Crow is the Crow. It's the bird.
Oh, I thought the Crow was Tintin.
But funnily enough, just like what I was talking about the screenings, and a few people were like, "Why is Eric?" They apparently during some of the screens they got a small number of people who brought that up, and they tried to clarify, and they were like, "No, the Crow is not the person; it's the bird." And at some point, they were like, "Forget it. Just let them think whatever they want."
So if he's not the Crow, is the cat the Crow?
Right?
Jesus is the Crow.
So his powers are pretty interesting because he's got obviously the ability to heal. He can also see through the bird. So the bird can fly through the city and find someone.
Yeah.
And then Eric can make his way to them.
This is something they developed for the movie. You know very well, since you've read the comic way more recently than I am. They never show Eric in the comic getting around, really. They think there's one moment where he's on a subway train or something like that, or in a car, but they never really show him getting around, and that was they really want to do with the film. Jeff Most and Alex Proyas, Brandon, they all agreed we want to see him getting around. The comic never really explains how he knows where to find these people. He just sort of knows where to find these people, and the bird vision was a big component of developing that. One extra little asterisk, because I think this is neat, very quick. They set up a system on set in one of the sound stages or outside one of the sound stages with a gigantic industrial fan and a green screen backing. They actually used ravens for this movie, not crows. Ravens are apparently slightly more intelligent and a bit easier to train. And apparently the trainer and the birds for this movie were incredible. These birds typically will not fly at all in rain. And the trainer had birds that he could get to fly even in fake rain. But they took some of the birds outside or wherever it was, this fan set up, and these fucking ravens can hover in place over a powerful enough fan. So they would have the birds hover in place over the fan, and the trainer is so good with them, the trainer could use hand signals, and the birds would do aerial tricks in this fan air. And they would use it against the green screen, and all of the footage they used of the birds flying through Detroit to lead Eric around was all captured in this way. They captured the birds flying over the fan and they composited it into the image, which I think is very neat. Here's the one problem, the last part of the note. The birds would only flap their wings when they went to land. Because if they flapped their wings under any other circumstances, they would flap away from the fan and the fan wouldn't hold them up anymore. So like 98% of the footage they got filming this way, the birds don't flap their wings. And it made it very difficult for them to figure out how to get it into the movie realistically when the bird was gliding the whole time. But it kind of worked, and I think the feeling was it also gave the bird a more surreal feeling. Like it's a crow, but it's not an earth crow. It's like a heaven crow. It's a crow that brings souls back to earth. So yeah.
This ain't your run-of-the-mill crow, Steve.
It's your mama's crow.
But it's great. And Jeff Most, who produced the other Crow movies, said in his commentary that one of the ravens they used for this movie also appeared in all of the others.
Oh, well, thank God there's some crossover there.
Right, yeah, exactly.
This movie does spend a little bit of time with character development.
Yeah.
And I know we talked about Terminator Genisys recently, a movie that spends no time with character development. But after this kill, Eric pays a visit to Officer Albrecht, who I want to call O'Malley because he plays a cop in Airheads, and his name's O'Malley in Airheads.
Right. God, he and Reginald Fell Johnson, the dad from Family Matters, the two of them both played black cops quite a lot.
Yeah.
I shot a kid.
But yeah, I think there's some good stuff here when Eric visits him.
Yeah.
Not only does it start to like form their alliance, which comes into play at the end of the movie, but we get to see more of Eric's other side, because there's the revenge side, but then there's also the tragic side, the part that's like dealing with the pain of what's leading him down this path of revenge. And I love to see that. And he gives Albrecht some relationship advice. You know, he says how nothing is trivial.
Hey. You okay?
I saw her. I saw her through your eyes. You stayed with her the whole time.
Yeah, well, you gotta understand something, right? I
I was hoping she'd come out of it, you know. Something I could work with. Yeah.
Okay. Why didn't you do something about it?
Come on, you think any of those people in that building, even the ones who signed the petition, would talk after what happened to you? I kept asking questions and finally got busted for sticking my nose where it wasn't wanted.
This your wife?
Yeah, well, not anymore. We're getting a divorce.
It's funny. Little things used to mean so much to Shelley. I used to think they were kind of trivial. Believe me, nothing is trivial. You shouldn't smoke these. They'll kill you.
And I think that's some pretty powerful stuff. You know, there's not a lot of time spent in this scene, but the little bits we get, I do like seeing.
No, I agree with you. I think it's a real nice scene between the two of them. It's a nice connection point. It's also, we don't have to touch on the end until we get there, but I'll just say that this is a clutch moment in regards to how the climax of the film works out. Eric imprinting with Albrecht's memories becomes an important component later.
It's another power for the list, right?
Yeah, exactly. Another power for the list. And, like, you know, the character development was a huge thing. One thing I forgot to mention earlier, I'll go over quickly because I know you know this will be close to my heart. Jeff Most, well, Alex and Proyas and Jeff Most both mentioned during their commentaries that they watched a lot of Hong Kong action movies with Brandon to get inspiration for this film and to help develop the character and the action. And Most got really into detail about this, and he talks about the fact that, in fact, a lot of the time they were sitting around Alex Proyas' house watching Hong Kong action movies on Laserdisc. That they had stacks of Hong Kong movies on Laserdisc. It was a really popular format in Asia. There were a lot of these movies on Laserdisc. And he said they watched so many of them, they got to a point where a lot of the movies they were watching didn't even have any English dubbing or subs. So they had no idea what they were watching. They were just watching it for inspiration. And that Brandon, of course, because his father's Bruce Lee, Brandon fucking loved them. And they drew a lot of it, like, and they did a lot of John Woo. And if you watch the climax fight scene in Top Dollar's office, that is a John Woo scene.
Absolutely.
Like, they could have taken that right from a John Woo movie. But yeah, I want to make mention of that because any chance I can get to mention that Laserdiscs played a part in the development of the movie.
You know, we talked about Gideon. He meets his demise around this point of the movie because he has a meeting with Top Dollar, and he tells Top Dollar about this character, about this guy that's going around killing T-Bird's crew, you know, and at first, Top Dollar isn't sure if he should believe him or not, but I think he does eventually.
And Grange says that he saw him at Fun Boys.
That's right.
Yeah.
And Tony Todd is really there to, like, solidify this.
Right.
Tony Todd is like the top henchman, right? And these guys are like bottom of the barrel.
Yeah, Tony Todd's like Top Dollar's right-hand man. He's the guy that you trust, like actually trust to deal with shit.
He's like a smooth talker, and he's got glasses, and he's like super, keeps his head.
He's so cool. He's the coolest motherfucking guy. They should have gotten him to play Shaft at that point in his life. Fucking Christ, is he cool. Right? God damn, man.
Man, I fucking love the dialogue in this scene. Like, as the scene starts, Gideon's like, then my shop got blown to hell and all this kind of... Other than that, my day sucked.
Yeah.
He's great. He's got all these one-liners.
Well, the dialogue in general is just like so cool, like in this movie. Like, it catches you off guard a lot of the time with little things like that.
There's a very noir-y element to this movie that you catch in certain, like, one moment where you first get it is where the first time we see Albrecht at the hot dog stand and there's like the 40s jazz music playing on the background.
Dude, they pepper in that jazz music with Albrecht, and it definitely gives you that noir vibe.
And, you know, they do it again with Polito's lines and stuff. It's a very noir-y moment there where the pawn shop owner getting interrogated like that.
I got stabbed. I shot the son of a bitch. I watched the bullet hole close by itself. And my business gets blown up real good. Other than that, my day sucked.
Yeah, I saw him too. He had a guitar. He winked at me before he jumped out a 4th floor window like he had wings.
He winked at you?
musicians.
When Tony Todd confirms Gideon's story, he's like, he winked at me before jumping out of a window like he had wings.
Winked at me before jumping out a third-story window.
Top Dollar's response is just, musicians.
Musicians.
This Top Dollar dude, like, one, I'm not going to say I hate him, but he's from another universe, this guy.
Oh, yeah.
Like, he's insane. He might be a little bit too over the top for me at times. I think this movie overall works, but I think he is sometimes just fucking ridiculous.
That's interesting. You and me, and because I'm in the same boat with Brandon, and I'm not talking shit. I like his performance. I think he's good, but I feel the same way about him. I like what he did. I like the character, but there's just a couple moments for it's the flip flop. That's very interesting. Not that one is more valid than the other. It's just I think it's funny in instances different people will have almost the same reaction about two totally separate characters in the same movie. Funny.
Top Dollar tends to dress like Lestat sometimes.
Holy shit, I can't believe he wasn't a vampire in that movie.
Right?
Interview was almost the same year.
It was the same year.
Yeah. Fucking Christ, he would have been great.
He's got the best locks in the villain hair game.
Oh, he does. He finally cut his hair at some point, like in the last 10 years. You look at pictures of him now, he's got short hair, and I'm like, no, grow it out again.
Yeah.
Like,
they really took that kind of Top Dollar, I guess, theme and really doubled down on that with the main villain of the second one, City of Angels, where he's just goth. He's like the most goth fucking crime lord ever.
She sees things that are fated to happen. She cut out her eyes with a carving knife because she wanted to make the vision stop. But that only made the vision stronger, didn't it, dear?
Why did you bring me here?
I'm glad you asked that, Sarah. You've got a very important part to play in this little drama of ours. I intend to capture the crow. And you, my dear, are the bird seed.
that guy, wait, that's the other African-American guy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, what's that character's name? I just can't remember what his name is.
Oh, fuck, I can't remember his
name. Okay, you don't have to remember names from the sequels.
Didn't he also play another villain in another, like, B horror movie? I swear that dude has also been... Was that the same actor who was the Pharaoh, the Raw, in Stargate? Or something like that? I swear to God.
It's been a while since I've seen Stargate, but he's got a really cool voice, too.
Yeah, that's the thing. He's got that's a shit movie, but he's got that persona for. I'm gonna have to look it up. I swear that dude's been a bad guy in other movies.
So after brooding on the roof and playing some guitar, Eric eventually catches up with T-Bird, who is kind of like the sub-boss of this little group of villains. At least that's what I get the impression. They call him T-Bird's crew.
Right.
He catches up to T-Bird and takes him for a ride. You know, he kind of tells T-Bird who he is and what he's there for eventually. And Eric asks T-Bird about, like, what happened a year ago. And T-Bird tells him, "No, that wasn't us. It was them, the Warriors."
The Warriors did it. I thought it was a little distracting when he, like, pulled out a bunch of bottles and was like, "Crow, come out to play."
Yeah. His gang in that movie was called the Rogues.
He's got one thing, right?
Right?
He's always a psychotic gang leader.
I mean, that's definitely one of the things he's known for. He's been in so much. I mean, I had to look it up. 48 Hours, Commando, Malcolm X, Last Man Standing, John Wick movies. He was in one of Josh's favorites, The Adventures of Ford Fairlane.
Oh, yeah.
You know, but yeah, that dude's had a great career.
That guy is great, and he is just a guy that you want to fucking punch in the face.
Yes, but his performance for the death scene especially was crazy. I mean, all the way through the car chase with the cops where he's trying to negotiate with Eric, and then when he finally comes to the realization that Eric's somebody he killed, and like, how the fuck could you be here? Nobody gets to come back.
I've got to point this out in that car chase. This is a line that's always fucking stood out to me. This is a goddamn rated R movie, man. People are getting violently murdered. And then when they pass by the cops, the one cop, "What the crap?"
Yeah, he does. They ended up using miniatures for portions of that car chase, and you can sort of tell if you're looking for it, but it looks fantastic. To me, I'm glad they did it. I love it. I think it makes it look that much more like a comic, and it comes off perfect. But Proyas in his commentary said that they did not originally intend to use any miniatures for that, and they ended up not having a choice because the studio lot they were shooting at, North Carolina, had so little streetscape that they just did not have enough room to shoot a real full chase there, and they didn't have time or money to shoot a chase anywhere else. So they ended up using the miniatures to fill in the shots, but out of necessity, which I think is awesome. And then when we get to T-Bird's actual moment of death, I got another note that I think is amusing.
Well, T-Bird's reaction to finding out that Eric Draven is a man that he killed that is back from the dead a year later.
He's so good.
I don't know. What? Huh? What? What are you talking about? No. You mean that place downtown?
Yeah, I remember her. We needed to put some fear into that little lady. She wasn't going along with our tenant relocation program. Her idiot boyfriend shows up and turns a simple sweep and clear into a total clusterfuck. Who gives a shit? It's ancient history. What? What do you want? What is it? What? Speak to me. Speak!
Did you send us these complaints?
Come here.
A bash? The devil stood? Does it get you sweating?
I know you. I know you. I knew you. I knew you. But you ain't you. You can't be you. We put you through the window. There ain't no coming back. This is the really real world. There ain't no coming back. We killed your dad. There ain't no coming back. There ain't no coming back. There ain't no coming back. A bash the devil stood and felt how awful goodness is. And felt how awful goodness is. And felt...
It might be the best acting in the movie, right?
It's great, but like it's almost like a line fumble that he gives and they kept in the movie. I'm not sure if it was a fumble or not, or like maybe it's there intentionally because of a nervous reaction and he's like just really like feeling this moment as an actor. He says, "This is the really real world."
The really real world. I love it. I don't think it's a fumble, but I can see why. Yeah, I love that part.
There ain't no coming back.
There ain't no coming back, man. There ain't no coming back.
Yeah, I think that is intentional because it's... I mean, how else do you, state that? Like, the realization that, like, something supernatural in the real world exists. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
What the fuck?
Yeah, and it's probably... I mean, despite this movie not being very realistic, that aside... I think might be my reaction. I'd be like, no, fucking impossible.
Yeah, there's no way this is happening.
You would be freaking out damn near in tears,
right.
Especially if you know you're about to fucking die.
Especially in his predicament, you know, because he's like duct taped to the driver's seat of his car.
I'm failing to think of anything specific. There are way too many instances in films where that people just see something like this and they're like, fine, whatever.
Yeah. All right, I can deal with this.
Right.
But yeah, he's, you know, duct taped to his car. There's like a bungee cord on the gas pedal. I think there's some kind of mechanism that I don't understand where Eric is going to release the bungee cord and it's going to press on the gas or something. I don't really know. But there's a fucking grenade in his lap.
Yeah.
Is that a grenade?
It's I can't remember what that's called, like a flashbang or something. It is a type of grenade, basically. There's a name for that I can't remember the correct term
A little
for,
explosive device in his lap.
But yeah, you know, and T-Bird, that's T-Bird's whole thing. He's the explosives guy. We were talking about this a little while ago. He gets Tintin with his knives. He gets Funboy with his opium. He gets T-Bird with his explosives. You know, and sends T-Bird off the end of a pier with the car loaded up with explosives and it blows apart. And that's where my little note was real quick. Two things. One, you can see it when you look. They ended up having to use an empty shell of a car body and a frame with nothing else. And you can sort of tell when it blows up that that's what it is. It's basically just a Hot Wheels. It's just like a body and a frame. And it sort of comes apart on itself. they couldn't really control the way it came apart, but they had to build the car that way out of necessity. But the second thing was, which I thought was hilarious when Price mentions it, they had a ramp set up at the end of that pier, and the car was supposed to go up the ramp and cruise like 100 feet out above the water while it burnt and then land. It was going to be this huge effect. But the ramp didn't work, and the car blew up and came apart the moment it came off the pier and just went right into the water, and they didn't have time or money for more cars or more takes, so that was what they used. That was it. That was one take.
It works great.
It works great. It looks fine, but yeah.
I like what they did there. And, I like you talked about, killing each guy with their own kind of gimmick.
Right.
The knives guy, the explosions guy.
Right.
The drug addict guy.
Another thing that always kind of stood out to me in this moment was he just pulls out like a little $1.99 thing of lighter fluid, and he's able to make this elaborate goddamn crow.
He was doing that everywhere, and I'm blanking on the guy's name now, but they actually took inspiration for that from a guy who was a real street artist, and this dude was Banksy 30 years before Banksy was even fucking born. And it's crazy that more people that don't know about him, and that I've forgotten his name, but he really was the original Banksy. He was a street artist, and it wasn't graffiti. It was always some like piece of stencil art or some kind of actual art that he'd put up in places to make people like think. And they drew inspiration from that. And when they got to the point where Eric Brandon was doing that crow after T-Bird's death, they could only make it work by cutting a groove into the asphalt in the shape of the crow and then filling it with a flammable fluid and then lighting it. So that's how they did it. And so at some point, at least for a while, on this back lot in North Carolina, there was an outline of a crow cut into their asphalt.
I really love that moment.
Yeah, me too.
I think it's beautiful, and it has this like nice operatic music playing to it. And the thing that I hate about it, though, is that it reminds me of a shittier movie. It reminds me of Daredevil with the Ben Affleck.
God,
one.
yeah.
I was about to say, does anybody feel like Daredevil ripped that scene off?
Probably.
But like, it's executed so well here, and it's tarnished kind of by a lesser movie being known for doing that. But I love the moment in The Crow when it happens. It's really cool here.
Michael Clark Duncan was such a great person, but man, that Kingpin is pretty fucking stupid. I mean, not that Vincent D'Onofrio's version was really any better.
I love that version.
Oh, God, I don't.
I truly appreciate you getting to the matter.
And Vincent D'Onofrio's awesome. Anyway, I don't want to do that. I always derail us. All right.
So there's a little bit of downtime after these few killings here where Darla like tries to reconnect with her daughter.
Yeah.
Who's like skeptical at first, but I get the feeling that things are going to kind of work out. I don't think their lives are going to be perfect by any means,
No.
but I think there's going to be just like a little bit less misery in each of their lives after the involvement of Eric. But Sarah also separately reconnects with Eric on her own.
Right.
And this guy he's clearly like a loner guy on a quest for blood. But there's that little sliver of humanity with Albrecht and with Sarah.
Hell with you. I thought you cared.
Sarah, I do care.
Oh, yeah. Where it's a moment for him to reconnect to Sarah and also to Albrecht. And, he sees the memories of all the hours Albrecht spent waiting over Shelley while she was dying and the pain that she experienced in that moment. And, and that's, again, that moment comes back at the end. I mean, Eric ends up needing that memory.
That's him. That's him. But he looked different. He was all painted up white like some kind of dead whore. I seen him. T-Bird, he sent me in for some road beers, right? And he took him away, but I chased him down. And he flashed right T-Bird to his fucking car. Oh, T-Bird, here's to you, buddy.
We ought to just videotape this, play it back in slow motion.
Fire it up. Fire it up. Fire it up.
See the grave?
Fire it up.
Empty.
Fire. Grave? What grave? What about my fucking grave? Oh!
3 out of 4. He's working his way back to this speed freak right here.
It's not fair. It's Fun Boy's fault. That boy was out of control. T-Bird, he came in here, weighs them both, and now this goat's gonna kill my ass next. Ghost's gonna kill my ass next. This ghost's gonna kill me.
Hey, it ain't no ghost.
And then we move on to the last guy that needs to be offed, which is a fellow named Skank.
Skank's so great. I mean, he's a complete piece of shit, but just the way that character's played is fantastic.
Skank is insane. He's like this weird, pathetic little weasel fuck. And he's like reporting everything to Top Dollar, what he saw with the car explosion, and Top Dollar just punches him in the fucking face.
T-Bird had sent him into that convenience store to get road beers and cigarettes, and then Eric runs off with T-Bird and kills him before Skank can do anything. But that scene where Skank's in the liquor store, really quick, they'd written a scene and they actually filmed at least part of it. Skank was supposed to get held up inside the store being robbed by two armed 10-year-olds, and it was like a very RoboCop moment. And they ended up
RoboCop 2 moment.
Right, exactly. And they ended up trimming it out. But part of the reason Skank didn't react more quickly to T-Bird disappearing is supposed to be because he was getting held up by a couple of kids.
Like Skank.
It would have been awesome if the kids were in like baseball outfits.
Right? And they were in RoboCop 2. That's weird.
Skank is like a barely comprehensible lunatic. Like,
oh yeah, speed freak.
I feel like I've met guys like him in rehab.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've never been in rehab, but I've met guys like him from rehab.
Yeah.
I've met people like him all across Alabama.
Yeah, LA too. Yeah, these guys are around.
But Top Dollar assembles all the mini bosses of Detroit here to discuss Devil's Night.
It's a pretty fun scene. It's a very, very comic book scene with the spread of them. I hate the one dude with the hoodie and the glasses, though.
You don't like that guy?
No, I really don't. It looks like Todd McFarlane's worst attempt to write a gangbanger for a Spawn comic. And I love Spawn, I love McFarlane.
Why are you calling him out specifically?
Because it just looks like a character he would draw to me. I don't know why. It just seems like something McFarlane would have stuck into one of his comics. It's just such a... Frankly, I'll put it like this. I don't want to get too specific otherwise, but he's the kind of character a white person who's never seen an actual gangbanger draws to look like a gangbanger. Like, it's very cliche. I don't like that character. But yeah.
Todd McFarlane's like, who the fuck is this guy talking shit about?
Right?
What did
No,
I do
I
to
love
him?
Todd McFarlane. I fucking do.
What the fuck did I do?
But he oh god, what are the two cops' names in Spawn? Now I'm forgetting their name. But he looks like something they didn't interrogate. It's Twitch. Twitch is the little one.
Twitch and Sam.
Sam, thank
Martin
you.
Sheen?
Oh god, no! Please don't put that in my head. I don't want to think about that.
So yeah, he has all the mini bosses assembled in this room, and he's talking about Devil's Night, and
I lit the first fires.
He's kind of going for this like real anarchist angle. He's like, Devil's Night was this thing that I created.
He becomes Bane. He becomes Bane in this moment. It's a very League of Shadows. Like, I just want the shit to burn.
But like, he kind of contradicts himself at the end.
He does.
He's like,
I was gonna say it, dude. Yes.
Well. Devil's Night is upon us again. So we throw a little party, start a bunch of fires, make a little profit.
I like the pretty lies.
Problem is, it's all been done before. You see what I'm saying?
There's no reason to quit.
Wrong. Best reason to quit. Only reason to quit. Man has an idea. The idea attracts others, like-minded. The idea expands. The idea becomes an institution. What was the idea? See, that's what's been bothering me, boys. Because I tell you, when I used to think about the idea itself, it put a big old smile on my face.
You see, gentlemen, greed is for amateurs. Disorder, chaos, anarchy. Now that's fun.
What about Devil's Night?
What about it? I started the first fires in this goddamn city. Where I knew it, every charlatan and shitheel was imitating me. Do you know what they got now? Devil's Night greeting cards. Isn't that precious? The idea has become the institution, boys. Time to move along.
You don't want us to do light my fire time for the whole city.
No, I want you to set a fire so goddamn big the gods will notice us again. That's what I'm saying.
I want all of you boys to be able to look me straight in the eye one more time and say, "Are we having fun or what?" Hey, you! What's your name? Skank? You don't feel that?
I feel like a little worm on a big fucking hook.
I feel like a little worm on a big fucking hook. Well, boy, your mama must be damn proud of you.
He's like, we've been doing all these fires, and they've become part of the system now. And the whole point was anarchy. So we need to quit doing this because now it's just expected. They make greeting cards about this event.
Right.
And then at the end, he's like, we need just to do a bigger fire. Like
a bigger fire.
We're going to do something different that's actually the same but bigger. Yeah.
I was going to say the exact same thing. Like, what the fuck is the point of his speech? Because he's immediately like, yeah, we should reconsider what we've been doing these past few years. Let's just do it bigger.
Yeah, a big one. One big fire, please.
I'd like the same thing, but larger.
So there's no point in this conversation. You could have just, like, called me, man.
Steve, Eric shows up along with his crow, and he faces down this whole crew of mini-bosses, but he's here for Skank, and he demands Skank, doesn't he?
Yeah, he shows up and he demands Skank, and there's a fun moment between him and Top Dollar. Top Dollar kind of interrogates him for a second and says, "I'm sick of this shit," and tells everyone to kill him. I really like that, because that really is, to me, the reaction a villain should have. Like, there's always so much cliche in action movies where the villain wants to talk and get information and tell you all about their plan. It's like, why would you ever just kill the fucking guy?
We are not so different, you and I.
You know, and when Top Dollar's like, talks for about a minute and a half. It's like, yeah, fine, just kill this motherfucking guy.
Gentlemen.
Let me go. I gotta go.
You're him, huh? The Avenger. The killer of killers. Nice outfit. Not sure about the face, though.
I just want him.
Well, you can have him.
I see you have made your decision. Now let's see you enforce it.
Oh, this is already boring the shit out of me. Kill him!
That ain't her.
You know, it turns out Eric's not dead. He falls, he acts like he's dead, and then he's not dead, and he pulls a guy under the table with him, and it turns out, I'm going to be honest with you guys, part of me loves this, and it's a very John Woo. It is also, in another way, my least favorite part of this movie. This shootout feels like it goes on for about 25 minutes. I actually got to the point where I fast-forwarded through part of it just to get through it, because I was sick of watching it.
It does get a little redundant.
But yeah, and the worst part is you go through the deleted scenes. If they had shot this the way they wanted to, it would have been like a 15-minute long shootout. It was way too much. I love it up to a point, but even by John Woo standards, I think it went on too long. But the rest of it's great. Don't get me wrong. It's about 2 minutes too long for me.
I think it's at its best when Eric gets the sword.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is, you're right. That part gets a little wild again. I like it.
Yeah, and it's a nice change of pace.
Yeah.
You know, seeing a bunch of people shoot a guy that can't be killed with bullets,
right?
It does get a little bit old. When he gets the sword, it gets a little bit more fun. He's up close and personal.
And I like Top Dollar's exit. Like, it's finally, he's smart enough to realize that they're not going to kill this guy. Like, a lot of more stupid villains would hang out and just keep shooting him and shooting him and shooting him and shooting him and shooting him until he just dies. But, like, Top Dollar is finally like, oh shit, we really can't kill this guy this way, I'm leaving.
Yeah. I'm surprised Micah doesn't stick around to, like, do weird goths, like lick up blood from the floor or something.
Right?
Like, she's, humping the bodies.
I'd say the music shift helps the pacing a little bit, because it goes from this like almost like a escapist fantasy. Like he's just revenging out, just gunning out, bro. And then when the music that the band is supposed to be playing kicks off and it kicks in with the score, I think it becomes a little bit more serious.
Yeah.
That's pretty much when he just wraps up at that point, and it's more or less just fucking with Skank for a couple of minutes.
Yeah, he gets his hands on that actor, Angel something. He was great in that moment where Eric finally gets a hold of him, and they have a little exchange, and he's talking. God, what's the line? Eric says something to him, and he's like, "Skank's dead. Skank's over there. What you're talking to now is just the dead shell." Like, you know, it's Skank. Skank gets it. It's a good scene. I liked it.
Skank gets thrown out a window, which is actually how Eric died originally.
You know, it's interesting because the other guys really died in a way that was applicable to them. Skank doesn't really have that applicable thing, but you're right. Eric,
he's just a cockroach.
Right?
Yeah.
But you're right. Eric caps it off by killing Skank in the way that he died. The final act of Eric's life was getting tossed from the window, so it's very fitting that the final act of Skank's would be the same thing.
And it's his final victim.
Yeah.
That is the entirety of the crew that took him out.
You are absolutely right, and this leads to one of the few exemptions from the comic in this movie that I actually am a little bothered by. Eric had gotten a lot of info from the Crow through the comic, but his one other source of input, at least a little bit, was the Skull Cowboy, which I think is a great character. And Eric finishes with Skank, and he goes to his and Shelley's graves believing that he's done, and finds Sarah there, which leads up to the climax. But there's supposed to be a moment, it wasn't quite derived from a scene in the comic, but it was close. It was supposed to be a moment at the graveyard where Eric realizes that Sarah's been taken by Top Dollar, and he sees the Skull Cowboy for the last time. And the Skull Cowboy has a brief conversation with him, who tells him, and he tells Eric, "You are done. What you were brought here for is over. You're finished. Your power is already starting to fade. You are no longer immortal. You're no longer resistant to injury. And if you go into that church to save Sarah, you might die before you've accomplished saving her. And you really need to just be finished with your task." And Eric ignores him and goes in. They filmed most of that sequence and then decided they didn't like it. They didn't like the way the costume looked, and they thought it held the pacing up. So they ended up rewriting part of the movie to have Micah somehow nebulously figure out that if they hurt the bird, it takes Eric's power from him.
Well, I know why. She is an Asian goth queen, Steve. This knowledge is inherent to her.
She's just got knowledge of the occult.
Because they wanted to explain why during this final fight, I'll let you guys talk about it, but they wanted to explain why Eric was suddenly vulnerable, and without the Skull Cowboy telling him, "Your power's disappearing because you've already finished what you were brought back for," they needed a different reason to explain it. So they had Micah figure this out. James O'Barr particularly disliked that change, from what I understand.
I could see it, yeah.
He did not want that to be the case. That was never a rule in the comic. Hurting the bird didn't do anything to Eric in the comic. O'Barr argued with him about it, and they did it anyway.
It's more of like a classic movie thing to happen, right? To give him this weakness,
right?
And then have to have him still overcome, despite not having his abilities anymore.
Right.
This is where it's completely removed from the comic,
Yeah.
of course. Like, this is not present whatsoever in there.
Right.
So that, I take it, is the late, great Eric Draven.
He has power, but it is power you can take from him.
I like him already.
The crow is his link between the land of the living and the realm of the dead.
So kill the crow and destroy the man.
Growing up, I've always felt that plot point felt convoluted. It felt shoehorned in, felt last minute. It's not really explained. It's not really explored. And over the years, when I discovered like the character of the Skull Cowboy and the rewrites, that are those scenes available anywhere?
Yes and no. Both the DVD and the Blu-ray have a Okay, it's broken into 2 sections. There's one section that's actual full deleted scenes, and unfortunately, the Skull Cowboy's not in there, but you do get to see most of the fight between Funboy and Eric. There's a separate one that they call a deleted scenes montage, and in the montage, there's a couple of seconds where you can see Skull Cowboy, but nothing full. That being said, I'm going to have to go digging through my physical copies and get online again. I am 100% certain that the scene they shot of Eric and the Skull Cowboy talking got shot. I know it got shot. I've seen it before. That scene did not make it to post-production. It's not a finished scene. They didn't do the coloring. They didn't do the ADR. They did not finish the audio. It's very rough, but the scene exists. And when I went looking for it in the last week or so, I couldn't find it on my discs, which is very frustrating. So I'm going to have to figure it out. But the short answer is I know that it exists. And if you go digging like on YouTube, I would not be surprised if you can find it.
It does feel convoluted. And I think that mishandling of that writing does hurt it quite a bit. And that's a plot point that becomes a sticking point in all of the sequels. All of them follow this formula where the villains seem to figure out that the crow's tied with the powers, in the last 30 minutes of the movie.
You're right. It becomes a huge, persistent crutch that they overuse for every single other movie.
They fall back on quite a bit.
It's the Superman conundrum. When the only thing that can stop him is kryptonite, everyone who really wants to stop him just shows up with kryptonite over and over and over and over and over and over and over for 80 years. So yeah, I agree with you. It was a bad thing to have introduced to the franchise, but.
How do you feel about it, Corey?
I am sad to hear that carried over to the sequels.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's not really great, but, this movie following more of a cinematic formula has to do what it's doing here.
Yeah.
Eric's quest for revenge is seemingly complete, and when he goes to his grave, he has his goodbyes with Sarah. He gives her the engagement ring, which is also kind of something that happens in the comics for the stand-in version of that character.
You're gonna say I shouldn't be in a cemetery in the middle of the night, right?
Safest place in the world to be.
It's because everybody's dead. I knew you'd come here.
It's really late, Sarah.
You didn't say goodbye.
You're just gonna have to forgive me for that.
And you're never coming back.
I gave this to Shelley once. I think she'd like you to have it. This way you'll always remember her.
I'll never take it off.
But the movie has a final act, right? It has a big action scene to end with, so after Sarah walks away, she's immediately abducted nearby and taken into this church.
Yeah, it's really funny. Eric finds her and she says, "You should tell me I shouldn't be sleeping in a graveyard." And Eric's like, "No, it's the safest place in the world to be because everyone's dead." And then 3 minutes later, she gets kidnapped and almost murdered.
Not safe.
Not safe. It's really not a safe place to be. In fact, in New Orleans, the graveyards are one of the most dangerous places you can be.
I mean, even here with the crime lord being as goth as he is, right? He probably hangs out there all the time, drinking blood and stuff.
Right.
Playing with kidneys.
Drinking blood. Oh my God. He'd be a great Dracula.
3 feet to the right are a bunch of goth kids from the opening of Spawn.
Yeah. Sitting in a graveyard drinking beers, wearing ICP makeup. Just nodding at Eric. Cool makeup, man.
The kids from Pet Sematary 2 are right around the corner. Edward Furlong among them, but not yet the Crow. So Sarah's abducted, and Eric is lured into this church where he is ready to rescue her and I assume take out top dollar, although not part of his act for revenge. But they know the weakness. The weakness is you gotta shoot the fucking bird, Steve.
Yeah, here they decide the weakness is to shoot the bird, and they shoot it, and they injure it, and it takes away a lot of... Eric seems to survive quite a bit of being shot and stuff anyway, but
yeah,
it
he's
definitely...
all right.
Right?
Well, it calls into question, does he does he become mortal because the crow is injured? If they had killed the crow, would he have just auto-died?
Yeah, I mean...
Permadeath?
You're right. It opens... Having created this link opens up the door to a lot of these questions that never get answered. Like, clearly they've damaged some of his resilience, but not all of it. What happens if the bird actually dies?
But how much power is zapped?
Like,
Jarvis, give me a rundown.
Right? I mean, it's another reason O'Barr was right, and the two things never should have been connected. But Eric fights his way past Top Dollar's assistant.
Tony Todd, thank you. And he makes his way. He's got Albrecht in there's helping him, and there's a shootout that ensues, and he ends up confronting Micah, who's got the bird. And Micah is acting like she's going to kill the bird, and to your point, Josh, I think what we're supposed to infer is that if she does, Eric's just going to drop dead. Or be so vulnerable that he won't be able to fight. There's also some vague implication that she's going to take the power somehow.
Yeah, that somehow she can figure out how to transfer it.
That is something they touch upon in City of Angels, because they kill the crow, and then the main villain drinks the crow's blood.
Yeah, that's right.
And he's able to be invincible.
I'd forgotten about that.
He just gets, like, bird flu.
Right. God. And the crow pecks her eyes out, which is a pretty fun scene.
Yeah, when she gets her eyes pecked out, she falls down a bell tower. And were you getting Batman 89 vibes?
I was literally, the next thing out of my mouth was going to be a comment about Batman 89. Absolutely.
Yeah. What's the better bell tower fall to one's death?
Batman.
Yeah.
Come on. Yeah. But, I mean, you know, Vicky was probably a more compelling heroine than Sarah, but still.
Yeah. The damsel in distress.
Yes, right? But yeah, so that and it's really just Albrecht gets shot in the process, trying to chase Top Dollar, I think, up the staircase to the bell tower. And Eric ends up on the roof with Top Dollar, who's holding Sarah hostage.
Now this is a scene right out of Jack Slater 4.
Yeah, this really felt like Last Action Hero, man.
Yeah.
I mean, I did like, in a way, I kind of like Top Dollar tossing her, because I think that underlines that this character really, like, she doesn't matter to him. She's just, like, something he's using right this moment. But still, you're right. It's like, this is the moment, probably the one, other than maybe the Big John Woo shootout, where the movie really suddenly feels like a Hollywood production.
Yeah,
and the
very
whole rest
Hollywood.
of it, like, didn't.
It's a great way to describe it. This is a very Hollywood final showdown.
Right.
I do like, though, that Top Dollar is not pointing a gun at Eric. He's got a sword. Because he's so goth that he wants to use a sword.
Well, and this is... I'm going to do it. You know what's about to happen here, because I can't go a whole pod without mentioning Star Wars. It's you got all these people with blasters, and for some reason some of them are still using light swords. But it's fine. That's just part of the charisma of the characters. Like...
Eric doesn't have a sword, though. What does he use? A lightning rod?
Yeah, he gets beat up a little and then pulls a gigantic crucifix-shaped lightning rod or whatever it is off the top of this gigantic Gothic cathedral.
It's just the most goth thing ever is happening before our eyes, Steve.
Right, it really is. I mean, like, this is...
On the steeple of a church at night in the rain.
It's more goth than anything James O'Barr actually wrote into the comics.
On the night before Halloween?
At a cemetery, one guy has his face painted white.
Right.
The other guy looks like Dracula.
Yeah, I mean, this definitely looks
The
like...
only way it could be more goth is if this also took place in a Hot Topic.
I mean, or in the year 1886.
Yeah.
But, you know, yeah, so they have a big fight, and Eric gets to the point where he's so injured he can't even really fight, and it actually looks like Top Dollar's gonna kill him. And Top Dollar's got this great line about how his daddy told him every man's got a devil and you just got to find him and kill him, which is very true. I actually think the sentiment is true, in a figurative way.
Top Dollar was right all along.
Right, sort of. Top Dollar had some very true views on life, even if his MO was shitty overall. But this is the moment where Albrecht's memories really become clutch. Eric realizes in the moment he can't physically beat Top Dollar, and that if he just gives in, he's about to die. At which point he's going to leave Sarah hanging off the edge of this roof with Top Dollar. And he realizes that the memory of the pain that Shelley went through in her death is in itself a weapon. And that one of the reasons Top Dollar is able to function the way he does is because this is a man who is so psychotic and so disconnected from the pain he causes other human beings that it doesn't matter to him. And if you can interject 30 hours worth of it, or whatever it's supposed to be, into this guy's head all at once and make him suffer, the way that that victim suffered. You know, he's not going to be able to take it. So Eric grabs him and just a Hail Mary moment of desperation grabs Top Dollar's head and just lets loose with all those memories. But it's all focused on Shelley's pain and 30 hours of surgery and being defibrillated and all the cut wounds that Tintin left on her body and the being beaten and raped. The torture.
His asshole's going to be just wrecked.
Right? And just all at once into this monster's head, and he can't deal with it. He just collapses under the physical weight of having it all in his head at once.
You know, my daddy used to say, every man's got a devil, and you can't rest till you find him. What happened back there with you and your girlfriend? I cleared that building. Hell, nothing in this town happens without my say-so. So I'm sorry if I spoiled your wedding plans there, friend. But if it's any consolation to you, you have put a smile on my face. You got a lot of spirit, son. I am gonna miss you.
I have something to give you. I don't want it anymore. 30 hours of pain. All at once. All for you.
It's a very great moment, I think.
Yeah.
I like that, you know, it's like this aspect of like the memory transfer has some power and significance to this last moment of the fight.
Yeah.
It's also very Ghost Rider.
It is.
Bend and stare.
Boy, that's another property I wish they'd get right on film that they never have. But yeah.
Someday, maybe.
Maybe. Maybe they should let Alex Proyas direct that. That'd be cool. Anyway.
Starring Nicolas Cage.
No, please, we've tried that. I love Nicolas Cage. This new movie about him being in people's dreams, by the way, which is an A24 movie, looks fantastic. But yeah.
So that's how Top Dollar, our big villain of the movie, is defeated with this last act of desperation, as you described it, to transfer the pain over. I think it's really great. You know, Sarah's rescued. Ernie Hudson, fortunately, is not dead, although he is wounded pretty badly. Top Dollar, when he falls down, he is like impaled on this massive gargoyle that starts seemingly like spilling the blood out of its mouth. It's really cool, actually. It's a very good visual.
The most gothic goddamn thing ever.
Yeah, if he's gonna die, he's gonna go down like a true goth, my friend.
Yeah.
And Eric is fading away. Eric is dying again. And I think it's a really nice moment. It's a little bit like Ghost, you know, Patrick Swayze, but I think it's really great to see him like reunite with Shelley in this like sweet moment. I think it's executed really well. I think all the moments with Shelley are executed really well. You know, they're tender moments in the flashbacks that are peppered throughout the movie, as well as the death scene, which is quite tragic.
It is. I just had the weirdest fucking idea. I just suddenly imagined the Joker and Harley getting killed together and both of them being brought back by the Crow. Can you imagine what Harley would do? Because I was thinking, you were talking about Shelley, and I was thinking about these people being in love, and then I started thinking about psychotic women, and then Harley Quinn popped into my head. Like,
the Crow would never bring them back.
No, probably
The Crow
not.
would never bring a woman back. We've got 4 sequels proving that.
The Crow only brings men back, and only even then under very, very specific circumstances.
You've got to be a white man.
Thanks. If the people we love are stolen from us, the way to have them live on is to never stop loving them. Buildings burn, people die, but real love is forever.
The movie ends with kind of a message of real love being forever. I think it's quite nice.
I've got a question. Is Top Dollar killed in a similar fashion in the comic?
No, Top Dollar's like a decrepit old bearded dude in the comic.
Really?
Sort of, yeah. I don't remember him being kind of fragilely...
He's just taken out pretty unceremoniously.
Yeah.
He's not set up like a big boss like he
No.
is in this
Yeah, he's
movie.
like a drug dealer, really.
Yeah. He just gets taken out. He's just like third off the list or something like that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
So we're getting into final thoughts, and I want to say one real quick. It's not really about this movie. It's about The Crow in general, because The Crow is a franchise that might just never die.
Oh my god, Ed, I've got comments about this. I've got stuff, I've got a list. I had to write a list. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, Rupert Sanders, the man who brought us the 2017 Ghost in the Shell, is directing a Crow remake.
Oh, dude, you're like 3 steps ahead on this.
Oh, yeah.
I got all kinds of stuff before we even get to that.
And it's going to be starring Bill Skarsgård.
Yes.
A man who loves to do remakes of 90 movies where he is wearing white face paint.
That is absolutely true. They've been trying to do this one since 2008. Stephen Norrington was the one who got this version off the ground originally.
Jason Momoa was attached.
Yeah.
Fucking Tom Hiddleston was attached.
Mark Wahlberg was attached. Bradley Cooper was attached. Skarsgård got it later. This performer, FKA Twigs, is playing Shelley. The dude directing it also directed Creed 3 and the Gran Turismo movie that's out right now. He's got a movie coming about Bob Marley. But there have been other attempts. Back in 97, Rob Zombie tried to get a Crow movie made. It was reportedly going to be called The Crow 2037. According to reports, the film was going to be set in 2010 and center on a character who was murdered as a child along with his mother on Halloween night by a satanic priest and then is brought back. Sounds an awful lot like Michael Myers, and guess what? When the studio didn't buy this, he went and did a remake of Halloween.
My God, his fucking film sucks.
Right? This is really...
I'll say that I've said it before, I'll say it again. House of a Thousand Corpses.
It's lightning in a bottle. Especially Devil's Rejects.
But let's not even talk about the Munsters.
I'm not even going to read all of this. I'm just going to paraphrase, but really quick, just to show you how much spin-off material. 1994, James O'Barr and friend James Bergen collaborated on an album titled Fear and Bullets as a soundtrack to the original graphic novel. In 94, it was reissued with a limited edition hardcover of the graphic novel. In 98, O'Barr and an editor named Ed Kramer asked an array of writers, poets, and artists, including Iggy Pop and Henry Rollins, to interpret the character in their own way, which led to a collection of stories called The Crow, Shattered Lives, and Broken Dreams.
Is that why Iggy Pop is in the sequel?
Iggy Pop ended up getting that part because he found out way after the fact that he was James O'Barr's inspiration for Fun Boy and is the person that O'Barr wanted to have in the movie as Fun Boy.
Okay.
And they didn't use him for budget reasons. And when Pop
That's why he's basically Fun Boy 2.0.
Exactly. When Pop found that out, he really wanted to be in the sequel, so they just put him in it. Between 96 and 98, Kitchen Sink Press, which is the same company that collected the Crow issues into a graphic novel to begin with, published an additional 5-part miniseries and an additional one-shot with new avatars in place of Eric for every one of them. Also in 98, publisher London Night Studios printed another new 5-part series featuring Eric, along with 2 other original new Crow stories. 99, Image Comics releases a Crow comic book set with another version of Eric Draven. This one runs 10 parts and goes all the way till November. In 2011, Gallery Books publishes a special edition of O'Barr's Crow stories featuring around 60 pages of material that he drew for the original Crow and didn't include. In July 2012, IDW Publishing gets a new 5-issue Crow series called The Crow Death and Rebirth, which was written by John Shirley, the guy who adapted the script for this movie. That was followed by 4 additional IDW stories, and this is all in addition to the TV series from 98 called Stairway to Heaven, Marked Caskets, and from 96 to 98, another raft of novels was produced. This is me paraphrasing. There are so many novels and comics and television programs and music albums, and some of them feature Eric and some of them don't. What a cadre of work. From something that started off being an underground indie comic created by a guy who was sad that he'd lost his fiancée and printed by a tiny publisher. What an incredible success story.
Well, it's like a lesser version of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Yeah, you're
which is
right.
This like random black and white inked Daredevil parody.
Yeah. Yeah. God, Eastman and Laird's Turtle stuff is so good. And it was good for years. And that one, for me, I know Eastman and Laird have their own feelings about which parts they liked and which they didn't, but it ran through Mirage and IDW, and I think all of those comics were great.
Now, if we could just get the Crow as a guest character in a Mortal Kombat game, I think
that would be cool.
Yeah.
God, that would... You know what? There's another series. I've never played it. I know very little about it, but there's a series of games called Dead by Daylight, and a lot of the... I think the point is you play the Stalker in the game, and there's DLC... And I know that the DLC includes Pinhead from Hellraiser, and I think Freddy Krueger and the Xenomorph from the Alien movies.
Well, it's you either play as the stalker or the victims.
There you go. You know more about these than I do. But yeah, well, there's a lot of movie villains that have appeared in that franchise.
Yeah.
I really love Pinhead.
When you join a game, you can either be one of the people trying to escape or one of the horror icons, and you just try to kill the other players.
Yeah.
Josh, do you have any final thoughts before we go into ratings?
So let's address the Steven Seagal in the room.
You can go ahead and call him the elephant. He's used to it.
My God, what a person. So in an interview, I think it's with E Hollywood or something like that, he somehow tries to take credit for discovering the cause of death before the autopsy or something like that. The way he tells it is like, they called me up right afterwards. The moment it happened, I was the first one they called.
Bullshit.
Brandon Lee was shot. Someone call Steven Seagal.
Yeah,
Somebody call Steven Seagal. What is he going to say?
Nobody ever has ever said that.
Yeah.
Ever. They didn't even want to call Steven Seagal when they had a movie role to offer him. There's definitely no way anyone was calling him about this. Also, everyone on the set knew what happened the moment that it happened. He had a hole in his abdomen. There was no mystery in it.
And I thought James Coburn was a great guy, too, and I'm really sorry they're all gone. And when Brandon was killed like that, they called me a few minutes after it happened. It was in Carolina somewhere. They called me in the middle of the night, and they said, we think that he's dead, but the guy shot a blank gun at him. How could he be dead? He's dying. He's severely hurt, maybe dead. And I said, you will find a projectile in him. You'll find a bullet in him. And they said, that can't be. You're crazy. And I said, you will find a bullet in him. And they called me in the morning. And they said, you're amazing. And I said, why? And they said, there was a bullet in him. And I can go through the whole story on what really happened, which most people don't know. But the long and the short is when Brandon passed like that, I didn't sleep for 3 or 4 days.
Wow.
It just reminded me too much of certain things, and the loss of both of them was terrible for me.
You're gonna find a bullet in there. They're like, there is no way. And I told them, yeah, you're gonna find a bullet. And they called me the next morning and they were like, you were right. Oh my God, you're right. So like, what?
Man, if only we had listened to Seagal, 9/11 wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, right? I correctly identified after the fact that a man had been shot with a projectile.
Through the phone. That's how fucking awesome I am.
And like someone there thought it was important to immediately call Seagal.
Yeah, exactly.
What do we do? Someone was hurt. What do we do?
We've got an actor bleeding out on set. He's very clearly been shot with a projectile. Someone call Steven Seagal and find out what he thinks happened.
Does 911 just route to his cell phone?
Apparently. He is a police officer. He's a very professional law enforcement agent.
Honestly, I would feel safer calling Dolph Lundgren. At least that man has a degree.
First of all, that dude is insanely intelligent. He's got a degree in like compound chemistry or some crazy shit.
But he actually has a relationship with Brandon.
Yeah, but yeah, Dolph Rutger Hauer, Bruce Willis. I can think of about. I'd rather call Van Damme any day than Seagal. I mean, it's probably a whole list of action stars I'd rather have around than Steven Seagal.
It, Gary Sinise.
Yeah, exactly. Hell, I will take Tom Hanks as Forrest Gump before I'll take Steven Seagal.
And then they shot that man.
I'll take Eric Stoltz in the makeup from Mask. Almost anything is better than Seagal.
I called Eric Stoltz right away.
Right? Could you put on your mask makeup and come tell us what you think happened?
Unfortunately, by the time he showed up, he had been recasted as Michael J. Fox.
Yeah.
I would rather let Michael J. Fox off his meds perform surgery on me than call Steven Seagal about anything.
Shit.
And I mean that with all the respect in the world, because I actually really like Michael J. Fox, and I respect what he's doing, and I'm sorry that he's ill, but still.
Cross the line with that one, my friend.
Right?
I'm going to give a little note about the movie itself since we're in the final thoughts section. For some reason, one of the most famous lines from this movie is "It can't rain all the time."
Yeah.
And I like the idea of that line, but it's not executed great in this movie.
No, it really isn't.
To the point where me and my brother kind of turned it into a meme over the years. Where we just can't rain all the time.
It's more like surfing than skating. I wish the rain would stop just once.
Can't rain all the time.
Eric?
I did it with friends too. When I was like 12, 13, a friend of mine and I, anytime something we didn't like was going on, well, you can't rain all the time.
Well, it's that scene when he first says it to the girl, and it's like the kind of heart to heart. It ends so abruptly.
It does. Yeah, it's just over. And the only other payoff you sort of get is her going home and finding the vinyl.
Yeah.
The record album, yeah.
And then it's like a joke at the end, kind of. It's like, oh, it stopped raining. It can't rain all the time.
Can't rain all the time.
Oh, what do you know? All
Yeah.
right.
Great.
What are we going to do now? This whole thing is fucked up.
At least it stopped raining, huh?
Can't rain all the time.
No, I don't believe it. Is Nightmare your fault, Albrecht?
Well, looking forward to that reboot.
I don't know what to see. I mean, the one thing I will give that guy, and Corey will attest, and I won't dive into the fucking lecture. I have a lot of problems with that fucking Ghost in the Shell movie, like a litany of problems with that Ghost in the Shell movie. But
next episode is going to be on Ghost in the Shell,
right? But the one thing I will give them is that it looked really nice. The production design was really, really nice looking. So maybe he'll really nail the visuals on this. Who knows?
And then it won't have any of the moments that like make it
matter. Yeah, it'll be completely devoid of all the actual substance, but at least it'll look right. Yeah. Right.
Scarlett Johansson's in it for some reason.
Which is basically, you just described Ghost in the Shell. It's completely devoid of all the actual story and meaning from Ghost in the Shell, but it looked pretty good, so, yeah.
Very good. Let's get into ratings. Josh, I'm going to go to you. I know you've already made your decision, but let's see you enforce it.
I dare you.
I'm going to give this... Let's see, 9 top dollars out of 10. I think in another world, this could have been a 10 out of 10 like a RoboCop, in the sense that it's perfect in what it is trying to accomplish. It is not deep. It is just trying to be a revenge film with some fun goth comic book elements. It does unfortunately hurt a little bit that Brandon Lee wasn't around, so they had some writing issues, and it kind of shows, especially with the handling of him not having power in that final act. But it doesn't ruin it for me, so I'm just gonna knock it down a point. I'm gonna 9 out of 10.
All right, that's a pretty high rating. I'm gonna go next. I'm gonna also give it a high rating because I fucking love this movie. I really did. It's a fucking vibe. And I know I've said that about some other movies that are similar. I think that's how I described The Craft. There's just some really cool shit to this movie. My rating is 8.5. Ernie Hudson dual-wielding pistols. Actually, not a highlight of the movie, that scene. A little corny, that particular moment. There are some moments that are corny in here, for sure. But I think it really has a hard job of not being an overall cringe fest.
Yeah, exactly.
And it doesn't do that. It doesn't fall into that pit. And it would be so easy to fall into that pit. I think Brandon Lee's performance is a thing of beauty in this movie. I think his voice is perfect, his look is perfect, and he has actually a different voice when he's more interacting with regular people that he's close with, like Sarah and Ernie Hudson, and he kind of dials it back. But when he's in like the psycho crow mode, I think it's fucking awesome. And Really great movie, despite some of the plot contrivances and differences from the comic. You know, it's its own thing, right? It's an adaptation, so it's going to take some liberties. It's a movie, so it's going to feel like a movie. But I think those things are okay, and that's why I give it such a high rating. Steve, what about you?
You know what? I'm gonna just about carbon copy Josh's review. I'm gonna give this movie 9 mystical spirit carrying birds out of 10. It's got one of the best soundtracks of any movie ever. Anyone who wants to disagree with me about that can just go ahead and be wrong. It is absolutely a comic book brought to life. Whether or not it's the comic book it was supposed to be based on brought to life is a different debate, but it's definitely a comic book brought to life. It's surreal and beyond reality, and yet somehow in touch with reality at the same time. It's noirish without overindulging. It's of the early 90s while at the same time not really being of the early 90s. It embraces almost everything about Gothic media and aesthetic and music without being so overboard that it's cringy or stupid. I'm probably the only person in the world that doesn't love Brandon Lee's performance in this movie. I think he hammed it up in some places. I do not really feel like this is what was going to launch his career, but I also would have been happy to be wrong. And I'm sorry that this is the movie he ended his career with in any case. I think the supporting cast was incredible. I think Proyas's eye for the visuals was completely on point for what they needed. And that we're really talking about an imperfect gem that could have been a bit better rather than a movie that failed to live up at all. What an experience. I mean, it's definitely something I've got endless nostalgia for. I've been carrying it with me since the day I saw it in a theater 29 years ago. So, yeah.
Almost 30 years ago, Steve.
Yeah. God, I am old as fuck. God. And probably more ornery than I have any right to be. But,
yeah.
But yeah, that's it for me.
Well, thank you guys for the ratings. I just want to say to the listeners, if there have been any hiccups with the audio quality in this, I'm sorry. I'm in the process of getting some new equipment, so hopefully next time around, those hiccups won't be present. But of course, before we go into the very end here, Review Dude Josh was kind enough to join us again for this episode. I know it's been much anticipated by you, Josh, and you, Steve, us doing this Crow Pod. I'm glad we did it. Josh, maybe you can tell people what you do and where they can find you.
Who is your daddy and what does he do? You can find me at Video Acid. I was the only Video Acid until about a month after I changed my channel name, and then like 4 other channels cropped up named Video Acid. So that's fun. But you can find me there. I review like movies. I'm also like dipping into other types of content, like just 90s TV, video games, and other shit like that. If you have any other suggestions that you want me to do, just let me know.
Change your name to Acid Burn.
Crash and burn.
Thank you guys for being here. Thank you, Steve. You know, people have asked for you on some episodes, and I'm glad that you were able to come for this one. And the last one, episode 100. That was a lot of fun as well. Thank you, Josh, as always, for being a guest. And thank you, the listeners, for listening to us. I really appreciate you guys a lot. If you want to email, you can send an email to bigdumbmovie@gmail.com. My big ask for you is to leave us a positive rating and written review on Apple Podcasts. And subscribe to our YouTube channel, even if you don't listen to us there. If you see a video pop up from us, give it a thumbs up. Let's keep this channel growing so we can keep making things more. That's really what it's all about for me. I love making this podcast. You guys can help it grow, and I will make more.
Go ahead and send complaints to stevesaysshutup@geocities.net.
Yeah. Well, we went over all the Steve complaints on the last episode.
All right.
There was a lot, but they were all from one person. So not really a lot in the grand scheme of things.
Good.
There's just one person that fucking hated you for some reason.
Oh my god. I mean, look, if I'm being honest, I get it. If I weren't me, I probably would hate me. But
Fortunately, I am me.
Yeah, right?
And I love me.
Yeah, I love me. I have the best relationship with me of anybody in the world.
You are a man that makes love to himself a lot.
Oh, God, constantly. Constantly, but I got 2 girlfriends attached, so I'm fine.
This is getting real weird.
I know, right? Yeah, we gotta end this conversation immediately.
We have to end this podcast now. Thank you, listeners, so much for listening. We love you, and good night.
Good night.
Thank God this makeup's getting itchy on my face.